Welcome to this first course in our specialization in learning Spanish, and congratulations on taking your first steps towards becoming a Spanish speaker. I'm Robert Blake, professor of Spanish linguistics at UC Davis, and I'll be your guide on this exciting journey. Spanish is spoken by over 500 million people living in more than 21 countries throughout the world, making it the second most spoken language in the world, just behind Mandarin. In this first course, we'll start by learning to discuss yourself, your family, your friends, and we'll begin by building the basic vocabulary and understanding of Spanish grammar. And we'll explore the cultural context of the Spanish-speaking world. So, let's get to it. ¡Vamos a ello! Hola y bienvenidos! This is the first module about family and friends. In this module, you'll learn to talk about family and friends at a basic level. You'll learn some Spanish pronunciation tips and be introduced to specific grammar rules regarding subject pronouns. You'll also learn how to count from 1 to 10, de 1 a 10. And you'll learn how to use the present tense for AR verbs and the very useful verb tener, which means to have or possess. You'll practice with the linking verb ser, to be, and you'll make it agree in person and number with the nouns, as well as make the nouns agree in gender and number with adjectives and with articles. Finally, in the Perspectiva section, you'll listen to Lina, who's from Colombia. She'll talk about her family and her new baby, Lulu. There's lots to do, so let's get to it. ¡Vamos a ello! Welcome to the vocabulary section of Lesson 1. In this first lesson, you will learn the basic words that deal with family and friends, the words you need to engage in everyday conversations. To memorize these new words, you need to make new associations between the sound, the images you will see, the written word, and the English translation. The mind is an incredible association machine. Use the concepts you already have in your head in English that will be stimulated by the pictures to make new associations with the Spanish sounds and the written forms. Second language acquisition research tells us that you need to repeat this process with each word about 10 times. Use the drag and drop exercise to match the correct Spanish word onto the images and then listen to the correct pronunciation. Afterwards, make sure to do the comprehension quiz and make sure you have an understanding of the whole vocabulary. There are many cognates that exist between English and Spanish. These are going to help you, but listen carefully for the changes in pronunciation. Okay, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this first lesson, you'll review the most important features of Spanish pronunciation and the differences with English. You'll also learn about subject pronouns, for example, I, you, she, he, it, we, they, in combination with the corresponding present tense forms for the AR verbs, which account for close to 80% of the verbs in Spanish. So think about that. Once you learn to conjugate AR verbs, you know how to conjugate 80% of the verbs in the entire language. That's pretty cool, right? You will also practice the verb form tengo, I have. That comes from an irregular ER verb that occurs in many useful expressions relating to family and yourself. You will be introduced to the concept of gender and number agreement because every noun in Spanish is either masculine or feminine, singular or plural, from a grammatical standpoint, and it has to agree with its articles and adjectives. Finally, by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to count from 1 to 10, de 1 a 10. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Spanish is basically pronounced as it's written, with a few exceptions. The double L sounds like a Y, me llamo Roberto. The V sounds like a B, vamos a ver. The J, or a G followed by an I or an E, sounds like an H, Jorge es gigante. The ñ sounds like ña, as in año and mañana. The H is silent, you never pronounce it, as in hijo, hablar. But most importantly, concentrate on pronouncing the 5 Spanish vowels with lots of jaw tension, always the same way. A, E, I, O, U. Mi amigo es muy educado. And finally, look out for the single R versus the double R in the middle of words. This can change the meaning of the word completely. The single R really sounds more like an English D or T between vowels, like the sound you hear in words ready, water. Here are the contrasting pairs. Caro, expensive. Carro, car. Pero, but. Perro, dog. Para, 2 or 4. Parra, grapevine. Maybe you'll, in the beginning, have some trouble pronouncing the R, but everybody's played with cars as a child and can make the sound drrrr. So it's a question now of learning exactly where to put it in the Spanish word. But most importantly, concentrate on the vowels. Always the same and always with lots of tension. A, E, I, O, U. When we speak and use verbs, there's always a point of view for each action. There's always a subject, such as I, you, she, he, it, we, y'all, or they. These are called subject pronouns, and they're classified as either being first, second, or third person, singular or plural. In English, only the third person singular forms, he, she, display what we call gender. Gender markings are much more prevalent in Spanish, as we're going to see right away. So for the first person, in English we say I for the singular form. In Spanish it's yo, which comes from the Latin word ego, yo. But for the plural, we have nosotros for a group of men or a mixed group, and we also have nosotras for a group of women, meaning we. So we have the forms yo and then nosotros, nosotras. For the second person, it's a little bit more complicated because they're informal forms and they're formal forms. So to say you in Spanish, you use the word tú if it's informal. You use the word usted if it's formal. And for the y'all form, you use the form vosotros for a mixed group or men, and you use the form vosotras for a group of women, y'all. This form is especially used in Spain. But most of Latin America uses a formal word, which is ustedes. Now for the third person, you have in the singular he or she, él and ella. For the plural, they, if it's a mixed group or a group of men, ellos, if it's a group of women, ellas. Now be advised there's a little wrinkle with the usted form and the ustedes form. We've already said that it's the second person, you and you all. But these forms, these words, usted and ustedes, they go with verb forms that are third person. We're going to do lots of practice. All nouns in Spanish are either masculine or feminine, singular or plural. Nouns must agree with their articles and adjectives in gender and number. In the case that a noun is the subject of a verb, it also has to agree with the verb in terms of the number and the person, first, second, or third. Most nouns that end in o are masculine, and those that end in a are feminine. There are a few exceptions, but very, very few. For nouns ending in e, or a consonant, You just have to memorize the gender. There's no way of knowing. But there is a few clues. Noun suffixes such as dad, sion, are feminine. To make the plural form with nouns ending in a vowel, o, a, or e, just add an s. Otherwise, you're going to need to add es, es, to the nouns ending in a consonant. For adjectives that end in the suffix dor, you have to make the plural by adding es for the masculine form and as for the feminine form. Mixed groups are always considered masculine in Spanish. Rosa y Roberto son amigos. Here are some more examples. I'm going to give the singular first and then the plural. Casa bonita, casas bonitas. Año pasado, años pasados. Hombre trabajador, hombres trabajadores. Mujer trabajadora, mujeres trabajadoras. Spanish nouns almost always are accompanied by a definite or an indefinite article, which also agrees in number and gender with the noun that it refers to. So let's look at the definite articles. We have both a masculine and a feminine form, a singular and a plural. So the masculine singular form is el, and the plural form is los. The feminine form is la, and the plural form is las. For the indefinite, we have the singular masculine form un, and the plural form unos. And for the feminine, we have the singular una and the plural unas. Let's look at some examples. La casa bonita, and in the plural, las casas bonitas. El año pasado, and in the plural, los años pasados. And now with the indefinite article, un hombre trabajador, and in the plural, unos hombres trabajadores. And another indefinite article, but this time feminine, una mujer trabajadora, and in the plural, unas mujeres trabajadoras. So keep an eye out for this agreement business. It won't be easy, and it's going to take you a number of years, actually, to do it fluently and without thinking. But remember, nouns always agree in gender and in number, and in some cases, if they're the subject of the sentence, also in person with the verb. To link a noun with another expression, use the linking verb ser, to be, with, of course, the correct person and number endings. Only nouns, articles, and adjectives agree in gender. Different from English, subject pronouns in Spanish are really optional. But remember that everything has to agree in person, number, and, if possible, gender. So let's look at the verb to be. First person, I, yo, soy. Plural, we, nosotros, somos. Second person, tú, eres. Plural, sois. Third person, es. Third person, plural, son. Now remember, the usted form is going to go with the third person of the verb. So it's usted es un hombre. Ustedes son hombres. Let's look at some examples. Soy un hombre sincero. Eres una mujer única y especial. La hija es muy inteligente. Somos las hijas de la familia Núñez. Vosotras sois pequeñas. Los hombres son trabajadores. Get used to this verb ser in all of its forms. It's clearly irregular in its forms. And practice it a lot because it's used everywhere. A particularly useful verb is tener for possession. But note that it's an irregular ER verb, and you just have to memorize the forms. So let's take a look at them. First person singular, tengo. First person plural, tenemos. Second person singular, tienes. Second person plural, tenéis. Third person singular, tiene. Third person plural, tienen. Let's look at some examples. Tengo una hermana. I have a sister. ¿Tienes hermanas? Do you have sisters? Tiene un hermano. He has, or she has, a brother. Tenemos una casa pequeña. We have a small house. Tenéis unos padres trabajadores. You all have parents who are very hardworking. This verb tener is going to pop up all over the place, especially in Lesson 2 when we start talking about body sensations. So practice it, memorize it, and it will serve you well. The AR verbs are the most frequent ones in Spanish, around 80% of the total number of verbs. The following person and number endings are added to the root in order to form the present tense. So first person, you add o, plural, amos. Second person, as, plural, ais. Third person, a, and third person, plural, an. So now let's put them onto the root of a verb like hablar, to talk. First person, hablo, plural, hablamos. Second person, hablas. Second person, plural, habláis. Third person, habla. Third person, plural, hablan. Here's an example. Hablo inglés y español, pero mis padres solo hablan inglés. I speak English and Spanish, but my parents only speak English. Since AR verbs are so frequent and the present tense is so important for talking about anything, you're going to want to memorize these endings, and you're going to want to practice with other AR verbs, finding the root and then adding the endings to it. So get to it. Vamos a ello. So, let's learn the numbers 1 through 10. Now, unlike English, when you start counting, you use your index finger. But in Spanish, you start with a thumb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ya saben los números. Welcome to the Perspectivas section, Lesson 1. In the Perspectivas sections, or perspectives, of this course, you're going to explore cultural topics from around the Spanish-speaking world. In this lesson, you'll hear from Lina, a young woman from Colombia, and she's talking about her husband and her baby Lulu. She has family both in Colombia and also in the United States. You will learn something about the geography and culture of Colombia as well. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello.
Hola Lina.
Hola Fer.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien, gracias. ¿Y tú?
Bien, también. Oye, ¿me puedes hablar un poco de tu familia?
Claro. Bueno, yo soy colombiana, entonces tengo familia en Colombia. tengo no mucha familia, pero algunas personas. Tengo, por ejemplo, una madre y un padre. Tengo 2 hermanos, una hermana mayor y un hermano también mayor. Yo soy la menor de mi familia. Y mi hermano está casado, pero no tiene hijos. Mi hermana sí está casada y también tiene 2 hijos, 2 niños. El mayor tiene 5 y el menor tiene 1 añito. Y luego estoy yo. Pero yo vivo en California, no vivo en Colombia, vivo en California y tengo un esposo y tengo una hija también. Mi hija tiene también 1 añito solamente y ella se parece mucho a mi esposo, a su padre. No se parece casi a mí porque tiene el pelo rubio y los ojos muy azules.
¿Cómo se llama a tu hija?
Ella se llama Lucía, pero le decimos Lulu como un apodo.
Muy bien. ¿Y Lulu cuántos años tiene?
Ella tiene 1 añito, solamente 1 año.
1 año, ok. ¿Nació aquí en California?
Nació en California, sí.
Muy bien. ¿Y Lulu conoce a sus primos?
Sí, claro. Lulu fue a Colombia conmigo y con mi esposo 2 veces. Cuando tenía 5 meses y cuando tenía 1 año, cuando cumplió 1 año. Así que conocí a su abuelo, a su abuela, a sus primos, a sus tíos y a todas mis amigas y amigos en Colombia también.
¿Y tú quieres tener una familia grande o pequeña?
No sé, no estoy segura. Por ahora me gusta tener una familia pequeña. En el futuro no lo sé.
Ok, perfecto. Gracias, Lina.
Gracias, chao.
Bye.
So, now we've been listening to Lina talk about her family. Let me summarize what she said. Although she was born in Colombia and still has family there, she lives in California with her husband and her daughter Lucille, but Lulu for short. Lulu looks a lot like her father, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her parents still live in Colombia, along with her older brother and sister. Lina is happy with her small family for now. Probably it won't grow too much bigger. Now that you know the basics of what she said, go ahead and watch Lina's video again and see if you can pick out more of what she said, and then go ahead and complete the comprehension quiz. Vamos a ello. Congratulations! Felicitaciones! Enhorabuena! You've now finished the first module, and you're on the right path. El buen camino for learning Spanish. With the verbs ser and tener, you can now describe yourself and your family. Keep practicing with tener because there are lots of bodily expressions with tener that you're going to learn in the next lessons. You also now know that nouns have gender and number and must agree with their corresponding articles and adjectives. And finally, you can count from 1 to 10 in Spanish, starting with the thumb, right? Enhorabuena. Check your progress by completing the final review quiz and doing the peer review activities. In the next lesson, we're going to start talking about the body, el cuerpo. I'll see you there. Nos vemos, eh? Bienvenidos a la lección 2. In this lesson, you will learn to talk about your body at a basic level and how to conjugate all regular verbs, AR, ER, and IR, in the present tense. You will use both the verb tener, to have, and the linking verb estar, to be, to express physical sensations. You'll also build upon what we learned last lesson and practice counting up to 100. Finally, in the Perspectiva section, you will listen to Juan, who is from southern Spain, talk about how he's feeling. He has a bad cold and he describes his symptoms and how his body is reacting to this illness. There's lots to do, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section for Lesson 2. In this section, you'll learn the basic words that deal with the body and physical sensations. Words like being happy, being sad, feeling sick, feeling uncomfortable. These are words you really need to learn in order to be able to engage in everyday conversations. To memorize these new words, you need to make new associations between the sound, the image, the written word, and the English translation. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the images and listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Remember, research tells us that you need to repeat this process about 10 times for each word in order for it to stick in the memory. Try to practice throughout the week in order to get really familiar with the vocabulary presented in this lesson. Once you're ready, make sure to do the comprehension checks. The many cognates that exist between English and Spanish will help, but listen carefully for changes in pronunciation. Okay, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section for Lesson 2. In this second lesson, you will practice expressions using a second linking verb, estar, that expresses changeable states, such as feeling so-so, having a cold, being happy, or being uncomfortable. In addition, you will combine the verb tener, that you learned in Lesson 1, with certain nouns to describe physical sensations like being thirsty, hungry, cold, hot. You will also learn to conjugate regular verbs, those ending in AR, ER, and IR, in the present tense. And finally, by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to count up to 100. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. When talking about changing physical states with adjectives, use the linking verb estar rather than ser. They both mean to be. Make sure everything you say agrees in person, number, and if possible, gender. So for the verb estar, we have yo estoy, tú estás, él está, ella está, usted está, nosotros estamos, vosotros estáis, ellos están, ustedes están. Here are some examples. Estoy regular. I'm feeling just so-so. Estoy molesto por la comida picante. I don't feel so good because of the spicy food. ¿Estás resfriado? Do you have a cold? ¿Está usted enfermo? Are you sick? Using the formal form. Mi compañero de piso está enferma. My roommate has a cold. Los ojos están irritados. My eyes are irritated. Chicos, ¿estáis contentos? Are you all happy? Remember that usted, ustedes, is the formal second-person subject pronoun, but they're paired with third-person verb endings. The verb tener combines with certain nouns in order to describe physical states. Remember, the verb is conjugated yo tengo, tú tienes, él tiene, nosotros tenemos, vosotros tenéis, and ellos tienen. So, for instance, you could use tener with the noun frío. Tengo frío, I'm cold. Tengo calor, I'm hot. ¿Tienes hambre? Are you hungry? ¿Tienes sed? Are you thirsty? Tiene fiebre. He has a fever. Tenemos tos. We have a cough. Tienen dolor. They are sore. The verb tener combines with certain nouns in order to describe physical states. Remember, the verb is conjugated yo tengo, tú tienes, él tiene, nosotros tenemos, vosotros tenéis, and ellos tienen. So, for instance, you could use tener with the noun frío. Tengo frío, I'm cold. Tengo calor, I'm hot. ¿Tienes hambre? Are you hungry? ¿Tienes sed? Are you thirsty? Tiene fiebre. He has a fever. Tenemos tos. We have a cough. Tienen dolor. They are sore. You've already learned about the present tense endings for AR verbs, such as preguntar, to ask questions. Remember, the AR verbs represent about 80% of all of the verbs that you're going to encounter. But here, you also have the endings for ER and IR verbs. Notice that the endings for ER, IR verbs are identical, except for the first and the second person plural forms, the nosotros and the vosotros forms. So let's review and take a look at the AR verbs with a verb such as preguntar. Yo pregunto, tú preguntas, él pregunta, nosotros preguntamos, vosotros preguntáis, ellos preguntan. Now let's look at an ER and an IR verb. An ER verb could be like the one comer, to eat, and an IR verb could be like vivir, to live. Yo como, yo vivo. Tú comes, tú vives. Él come, él vive. Nosotros comemos, nosotros vivimos. Vosotros coméis, vosotros vivís. Ellos comen, ellos viven. Here are some examples. Como pan todos los días. I eat bread every day. ¿Comes pan con la comida? Do you eat bread with your food? Usted come mucho pan. You eat a lot of bread. Comemos mucho durante el día. We eat a lot during the day. Ellos no comen nada. They hardly eat anything at all. Vivo en Davis. I live in Davis. ¿Vives en Davis? Do you live in Davis? Mi madre vive en Davis. My mother lives in Davis. Vivimos en California. We live in California. ¿Vivís en California? Do you all live in California? Viven en California. They live in California. Welcome to the Perspectivas section, Lesson 2. In this lesson, you will hear from Juan, a young Spaniard from the southeastern town of Murcia. He's not feeling so well. He has a cold with all of the familiar symptoms. You will also learn something about the geography and culture of Spain. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello.
Hola Juan, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Fer, ¿qué tal? Pues estoy regular. Yo creo que estoy resfriado.
¿Tienes gripe? ¿Qué tienes? ¿Qué sientes?
Pues a lo mejor es gripe. Yo espero que sea un resfriado. Pues, tengo los ojos irritados, me lloran mucho, me duele la garganta, tengo fiebre. No me duele todo el cuerpo, pero estoy molesto. De repente tengo frío, pero sudo y...
¿Tienes fiebre?
Un poco, no muy alta, pero sí que tengo algo de fiebre. Voy a ir al médico en 1 hora y yo supongo que medicina, algún medicamento...
¿En tu casa alguien está enfermo?
Mi compañera de piso está resfriada.
Oh.
Yo intenté apartarla, pero ella le gusta mucho dar abrazos. Sí.
Te has contagiado, Juan.
Yo creo que me contagié, sí.
Bueno, pues ve al médico y espero que te mejores para trabajar mañana.
Eso espero yo también. Gracias, Fernanda.
De nada.
Gracias.
Juan is having a tough day. He has a nasty cold coming on. He feels cold, his eyes are irritated and watering. He probably has a fever, and in general, he just feels uncomfortable and annoyed. He's going to see the doctor within the hour and expects that he'll get some medicine. He hopes it's not the flu, la gripe. He's probably picked up a viral infection from his roommate who likes to give a lot of hugs. In other words, está contagiado por ella. He's been infected by her. Now that I've explained the basics of what Juan is talking about, go ahead and rewatch the video a few times and see if you can understand a bit more about what he said, and then go ahead and complete the comprehension quiz. Congratulations! Felicitaciones! You've now finished the second lesson, and you're on a good track. Vas por buen camino. You're now able to talk about changes in your body and describe physical sensations using estar with adjectives such as estoy enfermo, estoy molesto, fuerte, débil, as well as employing that ever versatile verb tener with nouns such as tengo frío, tengo calor, tengo hambre, tengo sed, tengo tos. Keep practicing the present tense for these regular ER, AR, IR verbs, because in the next chapter we're going to see some irregular ones as well. Finally, you can now count up to 100 in Spanish. Enhorabuena! Check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about places, weather, and the environment. I'll see you there. Nos vemos pronto! Bienvenidos a la lección 3. In this third and final lesson of our first course in the specialization, you will learn about places and weather, as well as continue to practice the present tense with the AR, ER, and IR verbs, but especially with some irregular ones. You will examine more closely the differences between the two Spanish linking verbs, both which mean to be, ser and estar, but they're used very differently. You'll also learn to use the expression with the verb form hace plus nouns to talk about weather. We'll also talk about using tener que with infinitives to express future obligations. Finally, you'll learn how to make comparisons along with using possessive adjectives to distinguish your possessions from other people's possessions. In the Perspectiva section, you will listen to Dianelli talk about the central plaza of her hometown, Mérida, the capital of the state of Yucatan, Mexico. There's lots to do, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello! Welcome to the vocabulary section, lesson 3. In this section, you'll learn the basic vocabulary to talk about places, the environment, and the weather. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, the images, the written words, and the English translations. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate images, and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Remember to repeat this associative process about 10 times, especially during the week, spread out, so that you can memorize each word. Afterwards, make sure to complete the comprehension checks to be sure that you're understanding all of the vocabulary. Fortunately, there are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Okay, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section, lesson 3. In this third and final lesson of this course, you will examine the differences between the two linking verbs in Spanish, ser and estar. They both mean to be, but they're used differently. We'll also be introduced to some common irregular verbs in the present tense. In addition, you will practice two formulaic phrases, one that describes weather, hace plus noun, and another that expresses future obligations, tener que with infinitives. Finally, you'll learn to make comparisons and use possessive adjectives to indicate who owns what. So, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Ser is a verb that links nouns and adjectives that refer to defining characteristics. Let's look at some examples. Soy médico. Y usted es profesor. I'm a doctor, but you are a professor. Mérida es una ciudad. Mérida is a city. El clima es duro por el calor. The climate is very hard because of the heat. El centro es grande. The center part is very large. Dianele es inteligente. Dianele is intelligent. Ella es joven. She is young. La comida regional es muy rica. The regional food here is very good tasting. Los yucatecos son muy corteses. The people from the Yucatan are very courteous. Ojo, remember that the formal second person forms usted and ustedes are paired with the third person verbal endings. Now let's look at estar. It also means to be, just like ser, but it's used differently. It usually links adverbs and adjectives that refer to either relative locations or changing states, changing characteristics. Let's look at some examples. Estoy en Mérida. Tú estás en California. I'm in Mérida. You're in California. La plaza está en el centro urbano. The plaza is located in the urban center. Dianelli está muy bonita. Dianelli is all dressed up, looking very nice. Este helado está rico. This ice cream that I'm eating right now tastes really good. El tráfico está horrible ahora. Luego no hay nada. The traffic right now is terrible. Later there's nothing. Dianelli no está enferma, pero tiene alergias. Dianelli isn't sick, but she does have allergies. We need to look at a very small verb that never changes form that's very useful. It's used to introduce things into a conversation. It's the impersonal verb hay. It occurs with other nouns and presents them, and it usually occurs without articles, or if there's an article there, it has to be an indefinite article. And the form never varies. It's always hay. It's both singular and plural, and it's translated into English as there is, there are. Let's look at some examples. Hay personas, hay gente, hay niños en la plaza por la noche. There are people, there are children in the plaza during the night. Hay una película interesante en el cine. There's a really interesting picture, movie, going on at the theater. Hay obra de teatro esta noche? Is there a theater piece tonight? ¿Qué hay en la Plaza Central? What's going on in the Central Plaza? Okay, we've seen many verbs now in the present tense which are regular. But now we're going to see some irregular ones in the present tense because their stem vowel splits into two parts. They call that a diphthong. When they receive stress on this vowel, the vowel splits into two parts. So there are only two vowels that we're talking about. One ends in E and it changes to ye, and the other is O and it changes to we. Now, the nosotros and the vosotros forms are unaffected by these changes because the root vowels are never stressed in the present tense. So let's look at some examples. If we take a verb that is an AR verb like empezar, which means to begin or to start, whenever the stress falls on the E, it's going to split into two parts. And if it doesn't, it'll just be the same. So let's look at the first form. Yo empiezo. Tú empiezas. Él empieza. Nosotros empezamos. Vosotros empezáis. And ellos empiezan. For an ER or an IR verb, like for instance, poder, to be able to, very useful verb. Work a little bit with this verb poder because we repeat it over and over and over again. We're going to see that the O is going to split into we. And also dormir, we're going to see that the O splits into we. So let's take a look at it. Yo puedo. Yo duermo. Tú puedes. Tú duermes. Él puede. Él duerme. Now the nosotros and the vosotros form where no change is going to occur. Podemos. Dormimos. Podéis. Dormís. And now we're back to the third person plural, that again the stress falls on that O and it splits. Ellos pueden. Ellos duermen. Let's look at some examples. ¿Cuándo empieza la obra de teatro? When does the theater play begin? Empiezo a hablar español. I'm beginning to speak Spanish. Puedo tomar un helado aquí. I can get an ice cream here. Podemos ir al cine esta noche. We can go to the movies tonight. Notice that it's the nosotros form, so there's no change. Podemos. Duermo mal con el calor. I don't sleep well with the heat. Siempre duermen la siesta. They always take a nap. Dormimos con pijama. We sleep in pajamas. When we're talking about the weather, we're going to use the expression hace, followed by a series of nouns that have to do with the weather, like hace sol, hace calor, hace frío, hace viento, it's windy, hace buen tiempo, it's good weather, hace mal tiempo, it's terrible weather. We always use an impersonal form, hace, it doesn't change. So let's look at some more examples. Hace mucho calor en Mérida. It's really hot in Mérida. Hace buen tiempo en México porque hace mucho sol. Mexico has very good weather because there's always a lot of sun. Cuando hace viento, siempre estoy molesto. Whenever it's windy, I'm always a bit annoyed. Hace mucho frío en mi casa. It's very cold in my house. The form hace never changes. Use the formula tener que with an infinitive to express future obligations or tasks that you're going to carry out shortly. Remember, tener is an irregular verb too. The forms are tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, and tienen. Now let's look at some examples. Tengo que ir a la catedral mañana. I have to go to the cathedral tomorrow. Tienes que visitar la Plaza Central. You have to see the main plaza. Tenemos que beber mucha agua porque hace calor. We have to drink a lot of water because it's really hot. Tenemos que tomar un helado en la plaza. We just have to try an ice cream from the Plaza. When talking about your possessions, the things you own, or other people's things, use the following possessive adjectives, but be sure to make them agree in person, number, and gender with the nouns they modify. Remember that the third person form su, sus, can refer to her, his, its, their, as well as your, the formal, singular, and plural forms. So for the first person, we have in the singular, mi. In the plural, you're going to have to make things agree with the noun that they're modifying in terms of number and gender. Nuestro, nuestros, nuestra, nuestras. And then you have in the second person, tú, and in the plural, vuestro, vuestros, vuestra, vuestras. And in the third person, su and sus. Let's look at some examples. Tu casa es más grande que mi casa. Your house is bigger than mine. Nuestro país es muy bonito. Our country is very beautiful. Sus calles tienen mucho tráfico. Their streets have a lot of traffic. Está usted muy activa por su edad. You're very active for your age. Remember that the possessive adjectives are always going to agree with the noun they modify. The following formulaic expressions are used to make comparisons of inequality. Comparisons with words such as good or bad are substituted by mejor, mejores, peor, peores. So you have three formulae here. You have más o menos plus adjectives, and then que. With adverbs, you have más o menos, then the adverb, and then que. And with nouns, you have más o menos, the noun, and then que. Let's look at some examples. Su ciudad es más interesante que el campo. Your city skyline is more interesting than the countryside. Hace más calor en la ciudad que en las montañas. The cities are a lot hotter than being in the mountains. Yo soy menos inteligente que tú. I'm not as smart as you. Estoy resfriado, pero estoy mejor que ustedes. I'm sick, but I'm better than you are. Nuestro pueblo tiene menos calles que Mérida. Our hometown has fewer streets than Mérida. Welcome to the Perspectivas section for Lesson 3. In this section, you will hear from Dianelli, a young Mexican woman from Mérida, the capital of the state of Yucatan. She's pleased to show off Mérida's central plaza, a place where everyone comes to visit, worship, have fun both day and night. You'll also learn something about Mexican geography and culture. And as you see, it gets very hot in Mérida. So let's get on with it. Vamos a ello.
Hola, Dianelli.
Hola amiga, estamos hoy en la Plaza Central de Mérida.
¿Qué hay aquí?
En la plaza puedes encontrar al sur la Casa del Conquistador, a la izquierda el Palacio Municipal y a la derecha la Catedral de Mérida.
¿Tienes calor?
Hoy es un día en donde hace mucho calor, hay mucho sol y necesitamos refrescarnos.
¿Qué puede hacer la gente para divertirse?
Para divertirse podemos tomar un helado. Aquí enfrente está la heladería y cruzando la calle también podemos mirar una película en el cine.
Okay. ¿Y de noche qué puede hacer la gente aquí?
De noche podemos ir al teatro a disfrutar una obra o bien escuchar un concierto musical.
So in this video, Dianelli wants to show off her hometown of Mérida, the capital of the state of Yucatan, Mexico. Despite the heat, she goes around the plaza showing us the state government building, the cathedral, the first plaza residence or the Casa del Conquistador, which was built in 1549. She explains what we can do for fun. Grab an ice cream or beat the heat by watching a movie in the cine. At night, people go to the teatro and they watch a play or they take in a concert. Okay, now that we've summarized Dianelli's video, go back and rewatch the video a few times to see if you can pick out more of what she's saying. When you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Congratulations. Felicitaciones. You've now finished the last lesson. You're on the right track. Vas por buen camino. And you're now able to talk about places and weather using ser, estar, hay, and also the expression hace, plus a noun. You can also talk about future obligations with the expression tener que with infinitives. You've practiced some irregular verbs in the present tense, and you've learned to make comparisons and use the possessive adjectives. Enhorabuena! Check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Felicidades! You've completed the first course in this specialization, and you've begun to build your Spanish vocabulary. Now you can talk about yourself, your family, and you've learned about pronunciation, gender agreement, AR verbs, and that ever-useful verb tener. You can also count up to 10. And we've begun to explore the cultural context of the Spanish-speaking world through our interactions with Lina and Juan and Dianelli. The next course will take you even further, so stay with us and continue to build on your Spanish skills. Vamos a continuar. Bienvenido! Welcome to this second course in learning Spanish. I'm Robert Blake, professor of Spanish linguistics at UC Davis, and I'll be your guide on this exciting journey. In the first course, you learned how to speak about yourself, your family, your friends, and you began to build your basic vocabulary. In this course, we'll build on that vocabulary as we explore some common cultural experiences of the Spanish-speaking world. We'll take a trip to the open-air market, and you'll be able to express your likes and dislikes through your growing vocabulary and grammatical skills. We'll also practice about talking about your daily routines and how to spend your free time. By the end of this course, you will have doubled your vocabulary and mastered a number of useful phrases for everyday conversation. There's a lot to do, so vamos a ello! Hola, bienvenidos a la lección 1. In this lesson, you will visit the open-air market and learn to talk about food, as well as express your likes and dislikes using verbs like gustar. You will also learn how to ask questions and make requests in culturally appropriate ways without overusing por favor, which is not used that much in Spanish. To carry out these real-world tasks, you will also need indirect object pronouns, those pronouns that indicate the recipient of the action of the verb, to signal clearly who gets what. This will be one of the main points covered in this lesson. You will become familiar with a few more irregular verbs in the present tense and also learn some very useful expressions that are hard to translate into English. Finally, in the Perspectiva section, you'll go shopping in Mérida's Central Market in search of fresh fruit with Dianelli, whom you've already met if you took the first course in this specialization. Remember, you'll be buying food in Mexican pesos, so make sure you're comfortable with the numbers 1 to 100. There's lots to do, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello! Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this section, you will learn the basic vocabulary to talk about food, including purchasing food in the market. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, the images, the written words, and the English translations. In the exercise, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate image, and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need about 10 times for each word for it to stick in your memory. So, to become really comfortable with these words, do the activity multiple times throughout the week. When you're ready, do the comprehension checks to test yourself. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Okay, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Hola! Bienvenidos a la sección de Gramática. In this section, you'll learn to ask questions, make polite requests, and express likes and dislikes. You'll need to learn the indirect object pronouns, me, te, le, nos, os, les, to accomplish these tasks. You will also be introduced to more irregular verbs in the present tense, and finally, you'll practice some very useful formulaic phrases when out and about in public places and especially in the market. So let's go to it. Vamos a ello. Out in public, you will need to know what to buy. ¿Qué compras? How much to pay for it? ¿Cuánto cuesta? Where to find it? ¿Dónde está? And who is it for? ¿A quién o para quién le compras la cosa? These question words, qué, cuánto, dónde, a quién, are key ingredients of any conversation in any shop or market. Notice that these question words all bear a written accent on the root vowel to show that they are in fact question words. Also notice that with the expression how much, the question word cuánto will agree with the noun it modifies. ¿Cuánto dinero? ¿Cuántos pesos? ¿Cuántas monedas? How many coins? ¿Cuánta plata? How much silver, just how much money in a colloquial way. Let's see some more examples. ¿Qué compras en el mercado? What are you buying in the market? ¿Cuánto cuesta un kilo de tomates? How much is a kilo of tomates? ¿Cuántos pesos necesitamos para las compras? How many pesos do we need for the shopping we're doing today? ¿Cuánta plata nos hace falta para las compras? It's another way to say how much money do we need for shopping by referring to silver. ¿Cuánta plata? ¿Dónde puedo comprar carne? Where can I buy meat? ¿A quién le doy el dinero? Who do I give the money to? Yo soy vegetariano. ¿Para quién es la carne que compras? I'm a vegetarian. Who are you buying all this meat for? The beneficiary or recipient of an action, for better or worse, is known as the indirect object, and in Spanish it's marked with the preposition a followed by the noun. But more importantly, Spanish includes an indirect object pronoun adjacent to the verb, either before a conjugated verb or attached to the end of an infinitive. The indirect object noun can also double up along with the pronoun, especially for emphasis, to clarify the third-person forms, les, that can potentially refer to so many different individuals. For instance, it can refer to a usted, a él, a ella, a ellos, a ellas, a ustedes. But always include the indirect object pronoun next to the verb, whether or not the noun is present. The forms are me, te, le, nos, os, les. Here are some examples. ¿Me invitas un café? Or for emphasis, ¿me invitas a mí? Sí, te invito un café. Or for emphasis, te invito un café a ti. ¿Le invitamos un café? For clarity, les invitamos un café a ustedes. Gracias, sí, pueden invitarnos un café. El camarero le sirve un café a mi mujer. In this case, le refers to a mi mujer. Now we're really going to see how the indirect object pronouns come into play. Spanish has a large group of verbs that express likes and dislikes, along with an indirect object pronoun next to the verb to signal who's involved, who's benefiting, positively and negatively. In other words, the theme stimulates the action and agrees with the verb in the third person, singular or plural, while the beneficiary is marked with an indirect object pronoun. Again, me, te, le, nos, os, or les. The prototypical verb in this group is gustar, to be pleasing to or to like. But there are many others, such as interesar, to be interesting, encantar, to delight, fascinar, to fascinate, importar, to be important, faltar, to need, hacer falta, to be lacking, preocupar, to worry, molestar, to bother or bug, parecer, to appear or seem. If an infinitive follows these verbs, it's considered singular. Me gusta tomar café. Tomar café is the subject. Gusta agrees as singular with the subject, and me, that's the person involved. Here are some more examples. And again, the indirect object noun can double up with the pronoun, but the pronoun is what always has to be there. Me gustan los melones. I like melons. ¿A ti te gusta el melón? Do you like melon? ¿A usted le gustan los melones? Do you like melons? Les gusta la fruta a los mexicanos. Mexicans like fruit. Me importa la calidad de la comida. Food quality is important to me. ¿Te preocupa el precio? Are you worried about the price? Nos parece muy caro el precio. The price seems too high to us. ¿Os encanta la Plaza Central de Mérida? Do you all like the Central Plaza? ¿Te falta algo? Do you need anything? Sí, me hace falta un café. Yes, I need a coffee. No les molesta el calor a los yucatecos. The Yucatan people are not bothered by the heat. Notice that these verbs always agree in the third person with the thing that is causing the sensation or the action. Be careful using the first or the second person with a verb like gustar, to be pleasing, implies a sexual connotation. In English, polite requests are almost always accompanied by the word please. Not so in Spanish, although the words por favor are used. When making requests, instead of putting your own desires first, you need to ask if the other person is willing to do something for you. The idea of please is included in this viewpoint. Using the helping verbs poder, to be able, or querer, to want, to accomplish this. Notice that the person or persons doing the asking are signaled by indirect object pronouns. The words por favor are possible to use as well, but are really redundant with these formulaic expressions with poder and querer. Often you can just use the verb poner, to put, to bring, directly without any helping verbs. It sounds rude in English. You will bring me a coffee. But not so in Spanish. Me pones un café, which simply sounds natural and normal. Let's examine some more examples. ¿Puedes ponerme un café? Can you please bring me a coffee? ¿Nos quiere traer más agua? Can you please bring us more water? ¿Puede usted traerle un café a mi mujer? Can you please bring my wife a coffee? ¿Me pone un café con leche, por favor? Bring me a café latte, please. ¿Quieres ponerles otro vaso de leche a mis niños? Can you please bring my children another glass of milk? Ojo! Knowing when to address someone as tú or usted is tricky business in Spanish and will be treated more in depth in another lesson. It's always better to start out with the formal address, usted, ustedes, and then wait for the other person or persons to invite you to speak informally with the tú form. They'll say, tutéame, por favor. In a previous lesson, you learned that when the stress falls on the stem vowel of certain irregular verbs, either the e changes to ye or the o changes to we. Remember, the nosotros and the vosotros forms are unaffected because the root vowels in these forms never receive stress in the present tense. In this lesson, you will practice changes from e to ye and from o to we, respectively. First with the ER verb querer, to want, very useful verb, and the AR verb costar, to cost. So with querer, in the first person, we have quiero, second person, quieres, third person, quiere, the nosotros form, which never has anything irregular, queremos, the vosotros form, also regular, queréis, and then finally the third person plural form, which has the change, quieres. And likewise, for the verb to cost, costar, we have cuesto, cuestas, cuesta, costamos, costáis, cuestan. Now let's look at another group of irregular verbs, this time only IR verbs, where the stress stem vowel e changes to e. For instance, the verb pedir, to ask for. It's a good example of this change. So we have the endings pido, pides, pide, pedimos, regular, pedís, regular, piden. Other IR verbs with this particular change are repetir, to repeat, competir, to compete, corregir, to correct, and conseguir, to obtain. The verb decir, to say or to tell, is included in this IR verb group, but it also inserts a hard G into the first person singular yo form. So for decir, when you want to say, I'm telling, yo digo, tú dices, él o ella dice, nosotros decimos, vosotros decís, y ellos dicen. Here are some examples. Te digo que el mercado me fascina. I'm telling you the market just fascinates me. ¿Qué me dices? What are you saying? Nos dicen que la carne está al otro lado. They tell us that the meat section is over there. Los fruteros te dicen los precios. The fruit sellers will tell you the prices. Other verbs with sound changes just in the yo form are, inserting a G would be caer, to fall. Yo caigo, but then tú caes, él cae, caemos, caéis, caen. Traer, to bring. Yo traigo, tú traes, él trae, etc. Oír, to hear. Yo oigo, tú oyes, él oye. There's a Y written between the vowels so that you can preserve two syllables, given that the infinitive is oír, two syllables. There are also some verbs that insert a Z into the yo form. So producir, which means to produce, is in the yo form, produzco. But then later, produces, produce, producimos, producís, producen. Conducir, to drive. Yo conduzco, tú conduces. Traducir, to translate. Yo traduzco, tú traduces. Finally, two really frequent and useful irregular verbs are ir, to go, and dar, to give. Notice that the first person form, yo, adds a Y at the end. So with the verb ir, to go, it's voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van. And with dar, to give, it's doy, das, da, damos, dais, dan. Here are some examples. Voy al mercado con mis amigos. I go to the market with my friends. Le doy 15 pesos por un melón. I'll give you 15 pesos for one melon. As you might suspect, these irregular verbs are the most frequent verbs used in Spanish. So you have to practice them and get down these irregular forms. The following expressions are not very transparent. They cannot be translated word by word into English and still make sense. They're idioms. You need to memorize them as a whole with their meaning and colloquial use. Study the following examples and then try to work these expressions into your conversations. Pasarlo bien, pasar un buen rato. That's to have a good time. Dar un paseo, to go for a walk. Dar gato por liebre, which literally means to give me cat meat instead of rabbit, but actually it's translated as to fool someone. Quedar con los amigos, to make a date or an appointment with friends. So let's look at some examples. Quedo con mis amigos para ir al mercado. I have an appointment with my friends to go to the market. Damos un paseo por la Plaza Central. We take a leisurely walk through the central plaza. En el mercado, un vendedor quiere darnos gato por liebre, pero no puede. In the market, one of the sellers wants to fool us, but he can't do it. Pasamos un buen rato con nuestros amigos. We have a very good time with our friends. Hola, bienvenidos a la sección de Perspectivas. In this section, you'll hear from Dianelli as she goes on a buying trip at the open-air market, something that almost all Spanish-speaking cities have. She needs to buy lots of things, but she'll concentrate on buying fresh fruit, all in Mexican pesos. So let's go to the market. Vamos a ello.
Hola, estamos en el mercado y necesitamos comprar frutas, verduras y carne. Vamos. Compré 1 kilo de berenjenas.
¿Cuánto cuesta?
1 kilo cuesta 7 pesos.
Ok, ¿qué más?
Los plátanos cuestan 9 pesos el kilo y una pieza de melón cuestan 15 pesos.
Un melón.
Un melón, 15 pesos. También hay sandía. Ahora vamos a comprar 1 kilo de tomate. El kilo cuesta 12 pesos. Vamos a elegir los mejores. Aunque también podemos comprar un repollo. El repollo cuesta 20 pesos, un repollo.
20 la ropa, 20.
Delicioso.
Oye, Dianelli, ¿cuáles son tus frutas preferidas?
Bueno, me gustan mucho los tomates.
Ujú.
No me gusta la papaya. Pero me encanta el plátano.
Ok.
Es delicioso.
¿Cuál es la fruta que más te gusta?
La fruta que más me gusta es el melón. Y yo tengo uno. Vamos a comerlo.
Ok. Vamos.
So in the video, you saw that Dianelli is shopping for fruit, meat, and vegetables in the open-air market. She buys eggplant, bananas, melon, that's her favorite, pineapple, and tomatoes. She carefully selects the best tomatoes. She avoids the papaya. She doesn't care for it. She invites Fer, the interviewer, to go home with her and eat the melon while it's fresh. Now that you have a better idea of what Dianelli was talking about, go back and rewatch the video a few times and see if you can pick out more of what she's saying. When you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Congratulations! Felicitaciones! You've now finished the first lesson in this course. You can now ask for things politely, as well as make inquiries with question words such as qué, cuánto, dónde, a quién. You're starting to feel comfortable with using the ever-present indirect object pronouns, too. You can also use more irregular verbs in the present, and you've picked up some very useful expressions needed for everyday conversation. Enhorabuena! Before wrapping up this module, be sure to check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Hola, bienvenidos a la lección 2. In this module, you will be practicing talking about daily and weekly routines. In order to do this, you need to learn to use reflexive pronouns, me, te, se, nos, os, se. These same reflexive pronouns are used with some verbs to indicate a changed mental or physical state. For example, to become tired, to get worried, to get depressed, to become happy, or to get sad. You will also practice the present perfect tense to talk about recent past events, still relevant to the present conversation. And you'll master the days of the week and calendar months. There's a lot of vocabulary work to do in this lesson, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this section, you will learn the basic vocabulary to talk about your daily and weekly routines. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, the images, the written words, and the English translation. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate images, and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word, so it will stick in memory. So try to do this activity several times throughout the week until you've got it down pat. When you're ready to test yourself, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Okay, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Hola, bienvenidos a la sección de gramática. In this section, you'll learn to use reflexive pronouns, me, te, se, nos, os, se, with certain verbs to talk about your routines and changes in physical or mental states. These pronouns are identical to the indirect object pronouns you've already seen, except for the third-person forms, where se replaces both le and les. You'll also practice using both the present perfect tense and the expression acabar de, with an infinitive, to talk about recent past events. You'll also need to learn the days of the week and the month in order to describe your weekly routines. We'll cover that too. Okay, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. When the subject, the doer, and the indirect object, the patient, refer to one and the same person, the verb needs to have present a reflexive pronoun. Now, they're identical in form to the indirect object pronouns you've already learned, except for the third person, which is se for both the singular and plural instead of the le and the les that you learned for the indirect objects. So here's the paradigm. So for the first person, me, second person, te, third person, se, and then on the plural, first person, nos, second person, os, and third person plural, just the same as the singular, se. The English translation for this type of construction would involve saying either myself, yourself, himself, or using an expression such as to become, to get, depending on the meaning of the verb. In the case of body parts, hands, hair, eyes, or the entire body, Spanish uses a reflexive pronoun and avoids saying my hair, my hands, my body. Let's see some examples. Silvia se lava el pelo con un champú de piña. Sylvia washes her hair with a pineapple shampoo. ¿Te duchas antes de tomar el café? Do you take a shower, wash yourself, before having coffee? ¿Se lavan ustedes las manos después de ir a clase? Do you wash your hands after going to class? Me levanto a las 7 de la mañana. I get out of bed at about 7. En enero nos vestimos para el frío. In January, we dress up for the cold. Me acuesto muy tarde. I go to bed very late. ¿Te duermes enseguida? Do you fall asleep right away? Here's a list of verbs that refer to daily routines with the help of reflexive pronouns. Acostarse, which also has a change to o to we in the present tense, to go to bed. Dormirse also changes from o to we in the present tense, to fall asleep. Despertarse changes from e to ye in the present tense, to wake up. Levantarse, to get out of bed. Bañarse, or ducharse, which is to bathe or to shower. Limpiarse, to clean oneself. Lavarse, to wash oneself. There's another group of verbs that uses reflexive pronouns to express the idea of becoming or getting. This new resulting state can then be captured with the expression estar, plus a past participle of the same verb. The past participles end in ado for AR verbs and ido for ER or IR verbs, and it always agrees with the subject. You can also use ponerse plus an adjective to express the idea of becoming, especially with mental states. Ponerse triste, to get sad. Ponerse nervioso, to get nervous. Ponerse alegre, to become happy. Ponerse molesto, to become upset or bothered. Ponerse enfermo, to fall sick. There are some more verbs in this group. Cansarse, to become tired. Estar cansado, to be tired. Deprimirse, to become depressed. Estar deprimido, to be depressed. Preocuparse, to become worried. Estar preocupado, to be worried. Aburrirse, to become bored. Estar aburrido, to be bored. Enamorarse, to fall in love. Estar enamorado, to be in love. Engordarse, to become fat. Estar gordo, to be fat because you've just been doing a lot of eating. Here are some more examples. Me canso del frío de enero. I really get tired of cold weather in January. Estoy cansado del frío. I'm tired of this cold weather. ¿Te deprimes con el frío? Do you get depressed with the cold weather? Sí, estoy deprimido con el frío. Yes, I am depressed with the cold. Ella se enamora de los niños. She falls in love with all children. Está enamorada de los niños. She's in love with the children. Again, the reflexive pronoun plus the verb signals the process of becoming, and estar plus the past participle describes the resulting state. Well, we've learned a lot about talking about routines, but when you do routines, daily routines, weekly routines, you have to refer to the days of the week or the months. So let's learn these words. The days of the week are as follows, starting with Monday. Notice that there's no capitalization in Spanish of the days of the week. Lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado, domingo. Now, if you want to say something happens or happened on a particular day, just use the masculine singular article el before the day of the week. If an action happens habitually or happened habitually on that day, then use the plural form, los. Let's look at some examples. Van al mercado el martes. They're going to town on Tuesday, this Tuesday. He comido en el restaurante el viernes. I've eaten in that restaurant on Friday. Tomamos el café en el centro los viernes. We always drink coffee downtown every Friday. The months of the year are as follows and are rarely accompanied by an article, but rather appear in the expression el mes de and then followed by the month, or simply en enero, en febrero, en marzo, en abril, etc. So let's look, starting with January, enero, febrero, marzo, abril, mayo, junio, julio, agosto, septiembre, octubre, noviembre, diciembre. Let's look at some examples. Nos vestimos con chaqueta en diciembre. We wear jackets in December. Mi madre se engorda en agosto. My mother gets heavy in August. Se cansa mucho mi padre en el mes de septiembre. Mucho trabajo. My dad gets worn out in September. Lots of work. Mucha gente se casa en junio. A lot of people get married in June. Acabar de plus the infinitive, the present perfect tense, he hablado. These are two ways to express recent past events in Spanish. One is lexical, with acabar de plus an infinitive, or with the present perfect tense, which is composed of the helping verb haber and the past participle, which you've already seen, either hado or ido, depending if it's an AR or an ER-IR verb. But now, in the present perfect tense, the form is fixed and doesn't agree in number and gender. So, let's first look at acabar de plus the infinitive. Acabo de ducharme. I just finished showering. Acabamos de comer. No quiero más. We just ate. I don't want anything more. Silvia acaba de tener su primera clase. Sylvia just had her first class. Acaban de llamar. They just called. Now, to form the present perfect, conjugate haber in the present tense, and remember, the H is silent. and then add the past participle with the non-changing form of either hado or ido. Listen carefully, because with the reflexive pronouns, all the sounds seem to blend together. Listen for the past participle hado, ido, which tells you that the present perfect tense is in use. So, here's the conjugation of the helping verb. Has, ha, hemos, habéis, han. Now, let's look at some examples. Me he duchado con jabón de piña. I've showered with pineapple soap. Notice how everything runs together. Me he duchado. Second example. ¿Te has lavado el pelo hoy? Have you washed your hair today? Again, see how everything runs together. ¿Te has lavado? Third example. Mi madre no se ha dormido muy bien anoche. My mother didn't sleep very well last night. Nos hemos acostado muy tarde anoche. We've gone to bed very late last night. Los chicos se han cansado de la rutina del trabajo. The guys have gotten tired out with the routine of work. Well, we're back looking at the verb tener. It's a workhorse for us. Study the following expressions because you'll need them to talk about your health and that of others. Tener un exceso de peso, to be overweight, obese. Tener el colesterol alto o bajo, to have high or low cholesterol. Tener la tensión alta o baja, to have low or high blood pressure. Tener cuidado, to be careful. Let's look at some examples. Mi padre no tiene cuidado con la salud. Tiene la tensión muy alta. My dad isn't being careful with his health, and he has high blood pressure. Tengo un exceso de peso, pero no tengo el colesterol alto. I'm overweight, but I don't have high cholesterol. Now, when someone stops doing something harmful to themselves, you need to use the expression dejar de plus the infinitive. Let's look at some examples. Mi padre ha dejado de comer carne. My father has stopped eating meat. Yo he dejado de beber alcohol. I've stopped drinking alcohol. ¿Has dejado de fumar? Have you stopped smoking? Hola, bienvenidos a la sección de Perspectivas. In this section, you'll hear Silvia talk about her personal hygiene, her daily routines. She describes how and when she washes her hair, shaves her leg, brushes her teeth, washes her hands. There's lots of vocabulary and formulaic expressions to learn in this lesson, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello.
Silvia, ¿dónde estás?
¡Hola!
Hola, ¿qué haces ahí?
Estoy en la ducha.
Pero no te veo mojada.
No, es que ahora tengo el pelo corto. Y como tengo el pelo corto, solo me lo lavo 3 veces por semana. Los lunes, los miércoles y los viernes. Y hoy es martes.
Ok, bien.
Me lo lavo con un champú especial. Esto es un champú para pelo corto.
Bien.
También me he hecho acondicionador, porque si no se me hacen nudos.
Ok, bien.
Y a veces, cuando voy a la piscina, me rasuro las piernas.
Qué bueno, Silvia.
Ahora me estoy preparando porque voy a clase, así que me voy a lavar los dientes con el cepillo de dientes y la pasta. Utilizo Toms. Después me lavo la cara con un jabón de piña. Es un jabón de piña especial. Después voy a clase y cuando regreso, antes de comer, me lavo las manos. Me lavo las manos con el jabón de piña también.
Y...
Eres una chica muy limpia, Silvia.
Ay, claro.
¿Cuántas veces a la semana te lavas el pelo?
3 veces por semana.
¿Y cuántas veces a la semana te rasuras?
Depende. A veces 2.
Muy bien. ¿Qué utilizas después de rasurarte?
Utilizo crema. Tengo una crema especial. Es una crema hidratante para el cuerpo.
Todo el cuerpo.
Todo el cuerpo.
Ok. ¿Y para rasurarte utilizas algo más?
Utilizo espuma. Tengo una espuma también, una espuma de fresa, mora, que tiene un olor a
bien.
campo.
Y te hidrata la piel.
Hidrata la piel.
Ok, bien.
Y como te decía, como tengo el pelo corto, no me cepillo el pelo.
Ok.
Utilizo el acondicionador,
Ah, bien.
me lavo con el champú, me pongo el acondicionador y no me cepillo.
Ah, muy fácil.
No me cepillo.
Muy fácil,
No.
muy bien.
Lo que me cepillo son los dientes.
Menos mal.
Menos mal.
Muy bien, Silvia. Gracias.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Our interviewer, Fer, catches Sylvia in the shower, la ducha. Sylvia explains her weekly routines and personal hygiene. She washes her hair 3 times a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She shaves her legs with foam, espuma, once or twice a week when she comes back from swimming. Then she puts on a moisturizing cream, crema hidratante. She brushes her teeth daily, but doesn't comb her hair because she uses a special conditioner for short hair that takes out the knots. She washes her hands whenever she comes back from class. Now that you have a better idea of what Sylvia said, go back and rewatch the video a few times and see if you can pick out more of what she's saying. When you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Congratulations! Felicitaciones! ¡Qué bien! You should now be able to talk about personal routines during the week using reflexive pronouns, as well as make reference to recent changes in your physical and mental states. There's lots of formulaic and lexical expressions packed into this lesson, so be sure you keep reviewing your vocabulary. Before completing this module, be sure to check your progress by going to the review quiz and the peer review activities. Hola, bienvenidos a la lección 3. In this module, you'll practice talking about future events using the expression ir a with an infinitive. You'll also learn how to substitute pronouns for direct objects, me, te, lo, la, nos, os, los, las, and then how to combine them with other indirect object or reflexive pronouns that you've already studied. In addition, you'll practice the passive and impersonal voice using the construction with se. These are frequently used constructions to give instructions, summaries, medical prescriptions, and the like. Finally, you'll learn to talk about your free time and practice more expressions with that ever-useful verb, tener. There's lots to do, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Hola, welcome to the vocabulary section. In this section, you'll learn the basic vocabulary to talk about what you do in your free time. Strive to make new associations with the sounds, the images, the written words, and the English translations. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word into the appropriate images, and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Again, practice this activity several times during the week. Remember that research tells us you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word for it to stick in the memory. Once you're comfortable with the words, Do the comprehension check. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Hola, bienvenidos a la sección de Gramática. In this module, you'll learn how to replace the verb's direct object with the corresponding pronoun, me, te, lo, la, nos, os, los, las, in order to avoid unnecessary repetitions. These pronouns are identical in form to the indirect object and reflexive pronouns, except for the third person, where the lo, la are used instead of the le or a se, and los and las in the plural form are used instead of the les and the se. You'll learn how to express the passive and impersonal voice using se, and finally you'll practice some very useful expressions with the verb tener. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Future events are expressed using the construction ir a and an infinitive, and it means to be going to do something. The verb ir, to go, acts like a helping verb here. Study carefully the following examples because all of the words and vowels seem to flow into each other in the normal pronunciation. ¿Qué van a hacer esta noche? What are you guys going to do tonight? Miguel va a ver una película. Miguel is going to see a movie. Now, if there are any reflexive or object pronouns in question, they can precede the verb or attach to the end of the infinitive. Let's look at some examples. Me voy a acostar temprano. Voy a acostarme temprano. I'm going to bed early. ¿De veras? ¿Te vas a acostar ahora? ¿Vas a acostarte ahora? Really? Are you going to bed now? ¿El café lo van a tomar por la mañana o van a tomarlo por la mañana? Coffee? You're going to have it in the morning. The direct object receives the action of a transitive verb. Usually the direct object is a thing, but if it's a person, in Spanish, it's marked by the preposition a. It's called the personal a. Let's look at an example. Voy a comer las enchiladas. Las enchiladas is the direct object. I'm going to eat enchiladas. Voy a ver a Miguel. Miguel is the direct object. I'm going to see Miguel. In a normal conversation, after the first mention of the direct object, it's often replaced by a pronoun to cut down on the repetitions. The direct object pronouns are identical to the indirect object pronouns and the reflexive pronouns that you've already seen, except for the third person, which for the direct object pronouns is lo, la, masculine and feminine, singular, and los, las, masculine and feminine, plural. As always, place the object pronoun before the verb or attached to the infinitive. Let's look at some examples. Tocamos la guitarra todos los días. La tocamos todos los días. We play the guitar every day. We play it every day. Vamos a tocarla en la banda de Juan. Let's play it, the guitar, in Juan's band. Quiero comprar un bombo. I want to buy a bombo drum. Lo quiero comprar. Quiero comprarlo. I want to buy it. Certain verbs involve both a direct and an indirect object. If both objects are replaced by pronouns, the indirect object pronoun goes first, followed by the direct object pronoun, either as separate words before the verb or attached to the infinitive as one word. In the second case, a written accent is needed to maintain the original stress pattern. Let's look at some examples. Te quiero comprar un bombo. I want to buy a bombo drum for you. Te lo quiero comprar. I want to buy you it. Quiero comprártelo. I want to buy you it. Notice that in the second case there's a written accent. If the subject and the indirect object are one and the same person, the pronoun will be a reflexive one, which is se in the third person. Let's look at an example. Juan se quiere comprar un bombo. Juan wants to buy himself a bombo drum. Se lo quiere comprar. He wants to buy it for himself. Quiere comprárselo. He wants to buy it for himself. But notice there's a written accent. The subject usually carries out the action expressed by the verb, except for verbs like gustar, remember? That is to say, the subject is the doer, the agent. But sometimes people talk about actions without reference to any agent, or with reference only to some imagined impersonal agent. These constructions are called passive and impersonal constructions, respectively. With the passive se in Spanish, the verb appears with se and agrees in number, singular or plural, with the theme of the action. With the impersonal se, the verb is always in the third person singular. Here are some examples. Let's start with the passive se. Se abren las puertas a las 9. The doors open at 9. Note that puertas, which is plural, third person, is the subject of the sentence. Se abre el cine a las 9. The movie house opens at 9. Again, notice that cine is the subject of the sentence. Se tocan muchos instrumentos en la banda. Lots of instruments are played in this band. Again, the subject is instrumentos. Se toca el bombo debajo del brazo. The bombo drum is played under the arm. Now let's look at the impersonal se. No se puede vivir sin la música. One, you, can't live without music. Notice that the verb is always in the singular. No se puede vivir sin la música. Se pinta toda la vida. One or you can paint all throughout life. Se baila bien con el ritmo de la cumbia. One or you can dance well to the cumbia beat. Se tiene mucho éxito con la música rock. You can be very successful with rock music. Here are some more useful expressions dealing with entertainment. You need them to talk about your free time. Tener ganas de, to yearn or to really want to do something. Tener éxito, to be successful. Se trata de, to be about. And estrenarse algo, to debut or to come out. Let's look at some examples. Tengo ganas de estar en una banda. I really yearn or I want to be in a band. Hemos tenido éxito con la banda. We've had success with the band. La película se trata de amor. The movie is all about love. La nueva película de Cruz acaba de estrenarse. Cruz's new movie just premiered. Hola, bienvenidos a la sección de Perspectivas. In this section, you'll hear from another speaker named Juan, but this time from Argentina. Juan talks about his music, which is what he does in his free time. He plays in a band that specializes in Latin rhythms and rock. Pay attention to the different types of instruments he plays. Some are classical, and some come from the folk tradition. Search the web to find out where each instrument comes from. El bombo, la conga, la guitarra, el charango, el ukelele. There's lots to do in this lesson, so let's get to it. Vamos a ello.
Bien, ¿y tú?
Muy bien, tocando un poco el bombo.
El bongo.
Bombo.
Bombo.
Ajá.
¿Qué tipo de instrumento es?
El bombo es un instrumento hecho de madera y cuero que tiene dos partes. Se toca abajo del brazo o también se toca entre las piernas, ¿sí? Por ejemplo, así.
Muy bien. ¿Qué otro instrumento tocas?
Bueno, toco un poco las congas.
Ok, las congas, ajá.
El charango,
El charango, ajá.
que es muy parecido al ukelele,
Ukelele, ajá.
pero tiene otro sonido.
Ok,
También toco la guitarra.
ajá.
Normalmente la toco en open mics o también para mi banda.
¿Tienes una banda de música?
Ajá, tenemos una banda de música con unos amigos.
Ok.
Se llama Bomba Fried Rice.
¿Y qué instrumentos tienen en la banda?
En la banda tenemos metáfono, tenemos batería,
Ujú,
tenemos guitarra, bajo, congas,
ujú,
también tenemos piano,
ujú.
tenemos trompeta, trombón, también tenemos saxo
Muy bien.
y también tenemos voz.
Es una banda muy grande, ¿no?
Y somos normalmente entre 7 y 10 personas.
¿Y qué música es la que más se toca?
Y nosotros tocamos cumbia,
Ujú.
tocamos ska, tocamos rock, también tocamos música latina, un poco de discurso,
Ok,
salsa.
muy bien. Oye, Juan, ¿y nos puedes tocar alguna canción?
Claro, les puedo tocar una melodía que estaba practicando con el
Ajá.
charango.
El charango.
Ajá.
Ok,
Que faltan 2 cuerdas del charango.
ok.
Em,
¿Cómo se llama esta canción?
Todavía no le he puesto nombre, pero
Muy
le
bien.
podemos poner Serenata Charanga.
¿Tú la escribiste?
La compuse.
¿Tú la compusiste?
Ajá.
Muy bien. Ok, te escuchamos, Juan.
Empieza más o menos así.
Let's review what Juan was talking about in the last video. Juan is playing the bombo. This is a drum. Juan explains that he's in a band with 7 to 10 other musicians who play Latin music. Juan plays the bombo and the conga drums and the charango and the guitar. At the end, he plays us an original composition on the charango, which is a guitar-like instrument from the Andean region, Peru and Bolivia. It's fashioned out of an armadillo shell. Now that you have a better idea of what Juan is talking about, go back and re-watch the video several times and see if you can pick out more of what he's saying. And when you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Congratulations! Felicitaciones! You've now finished the last lesson in this course. ¡Bravo! ¡Qué buen trabajo has hecho! What great work you've done. In this module, you'll learn to talk about your pastimes, hobbies, in both the present and the future tense, using object pronouns where needed. You also practice using se to express the passive voice and to also express impersonal subjects. And finally, you added a few more expressions with our favorite verb tener, and you're making that part of your personal vocabulary. Now, be sure to check your progress by going to the review quiz and the peer review activities. Felicidades de nuevo! You have now completed the second course in this specialization, and you're on your way to becoming a proficient Spanish speaker. In this course, you learned how to form questions and how to express your likes and dislikes. You also started to explore how to use irregular verbs in the present tense, and we learned about the use of reflexive pronouns to express a state of being. By now, you have also added to your arsenal of useful phrases, and you're ready to take your skills even further. Hope to see you in the next course. Adelante! Hola y bienvenido al tercer curso en este programa. I'm Robert Blake, Professor of Spanish Linguistics at UC Davis, and I'll be your guide on this exciting journey. In the last course, we explored some of the cultural contexts of the Spanish-speaking world, and you've now built a basic vocabulary that'll help you speak about yourself, your likes, your dislikes, food, and the marketplace. In this course, we'll continue to build on what you've already learned, and we'll also introduce basic vocabulary to talk about sports and pastimes. We'll introduce the progressive tenses and also different helping verbs. We'll also learn how to talk about things in the past tense. We'll finish by talking about trips and living arrangements from your childhood. By the end of this course, you will have mastered 1,500 of the most commonly used Spanish words. Estás mejorando mucho! Enhorabuena. Hola, bienvenidos a la lección 1. This lesson is about sports and favorite pastimes. You will practice talking about ongoing events using estar plus the present participle, ando. You will also learn to use other helping verbs with the present participle, such as ir, venir, andar, seguir, continuar, as well as the expression hace plus time plus the present tense to indicate an event that has been going on for some time. You will also expand your use of the verb hacer with many new combinations and make new adverbs from adjectives using the suffix mente. So, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this lesson, you will learn the basic vocabulary to talk about sports and pastimes. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, the images, the written words, and the English translations. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate image, and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word to stick in the memory. Afterwards, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this lesson, you'll practice using the progressive tense in order to emphasize the ongoing nature of an event. You already know how to use the helping verb haber plus the past participle. Now you will also add estar, ir, venir, andar, seguir, and continuar with ando. That's the present participle. You will study how Spanish uses the expression hace plus time plus present tense to indicate an event has been going on for some time. You'll also use the verb hacer in new lexical combinations and create adverbs from adjectives using the suffix mente. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. The progressive tense, estar plus ando. In Spanish, you can just use the simple present tense to express an action that is habitual, ongoing, or future, as in the following examples. Miguel juega al fútbol todo el año. Miguel plays soccer all year round. That's a habitual action. Nos llama Miguel por teléfono. Miguel is calling us on the phone. That's an ongoing action. Miguel nos llama esta noche. Miguel will call us tonight. That's a future action. But if you want to be sure to indicate an ongoing action, in contrast to a habitual action or a future action, then use the progressive form estar plus the present participle ando. In Spanish, the progressive can never express the future like in English. It's always ongoing. Estoy escribiendo la tarea ahora. I'm doing the homework right now. Estoy tomando café. I'm drinking coffee right now. Estamos pensando en hacer un viaje. We are thinking about taking a trip. More helping verbs. Ir, venir, andar, seguir, continuar, all with the present participle ando. You just learned how to combine the helping verb estar with the present participle ando to form the progressive tense. But there are other helping verbs that also combine with ando to convey the same idea of ongoing action, as well as adding some more information. So our first example would be ir plus ando. And this is an ongoing action that looks forward in time and looks at the action as if it's happening little by little. Venir plus ando. This is an ongoing action that looks backward in time from some past beginning point. Andar plus ando. This is an ongoing action that is considered somewhat disorganized or erratic. And then seguir and continuar plus ando. This indicates a continuous, ongoing action and emphasizes the continuous nature. So study the following examples and their contexts to pick up the subtle differences in meaning. Here's the first example. Tengo un esguince, pero el pie va mejorando poco a poco. I have a sprain in my foot, but it's getting better little by little. Desde hace meses viene molestándome el pie. My foot has been bothering me for quite a few months now. Ando buscando la causa del dolor del pie. I've been going around trying to find out the exact cause of this foot pain. Sigo practicando a pesar del dolor del pie. I continue practicing despite the pain. So as you can see, each of these new helping verbs adds just a little bit more information to the context of an ongoing action. So try to study them and distinguish between their uses. They're very frequent in Spanish, so you might as well learn how to use them. Hace plus time expression plus que plus present tense. To capture an action that's been going on for some time and continues into the present, use the construction hace plus time plus que plus present tense. Or its flip version, which would be present tense plus desde hace plus the time expression. There's no need to translate the have been wording from English. It's understood with the use of the present tense with this construction. So let's look at an example. Hace 2 años que estudio español. I've been studying Spanish for 2 years now. Estudio español desde hace 2 años, which is the flip version of saying the same thing. Let's look at some more expressions with hacer. Here are some expressions with hacer that pertain to sports and also your physical condition. Hacer deporte, to play sports. Hacer ejercicio, to exercise. Hacer footing o hacer running, to go jogging. Hacer una dieta especial, to stick to a special diet. Hacerse daño, to hurt yourself. Hacerse una revisión, to give yourself a checkup. Here are some examples. Hago deporte los fines de semana. I play sports on the weekend. Me he hecho daño jugando al tenis. I've hurt myself playing tennis. ¿Haces running todas las tardes? Do you jog every afternoon? ¿Te has hecho una revisión del colesterol? Have you checked your cholesterol levels lately? Let's talk about turning adjectives into adverbs using the suffix mente. If you take a feminine singular form of an adjective and you add mente, you now have an adverb that describes the action of the verb. Conversationally, English uses a lot of adjectives just as adjectives, but in the function of adverbs all the time. For example, we say, they work hard. Please drive slow. You did real good. But Spanish is going to change that and add the suffix mente. So let's look at some examples. Claramente van ganando. Clearly, they're winning little by little. So we have the adjective claro, we have the feminine form clara, and we add mente, claramente. Básicamente, hacemos ejercicios. Basically, we exercise. The adjective is básico, the feminine form is básica, and we add the suffix mente, básicamente. Vienen saliendo alegremente del concierto. They're coming out happily from the concert. The adjective is alegre, the feminine form is alegre, we add mente, alegremente. Han luchado duramente, pero han perdido. They've played hard, but they lost. The adjective is duro, the feminine form is dura, we add mente, duramente. Welcome to the Perspectiva section. In this lesson, you will hear once again from Juan from Argentina talking about his favorite sport, soccer, or in Spanish, fútbol. He's been playing for over 20 years, and his intramural team has won several championships. He recommends stretching before going out on the field and keeping to a special diet to maintain strength. At the end of the video, he shows us how to control the ball, and finally he scores a golazo, which is a big goal. There's lots to learn from Juan about fútbol. Vamos a ello.
Hola.
¿Qué tal? ¿Qué estás
tal?
haciendo?
Estoy jugando al fútbol.
¿Así? ¿Hace cuántos años que juegas fútbol?
Hace más de 20 años que juego al fútbol.
¿Así? Aquí en Davis, ¿tienes un equipo?
Sí, tenemos un equipo con unos amigos.
Ajá.
Se llama La Garcha.
La Garcha. ¿Han ganado partidos?
Hemos salido campeones del Intramural.
¿Así?
Ajá, un par de veces, 3 veces,
¿Sí?
para ser exacto.
3 juegos ganados o 3 campeonatos ganados.
3 campeonatos,
Ah, muy bien.
3
ok.
estrellas en la camiseta.
Ok. Esa camiseta es de Argentina. ¿Se juega mucho fútbol en Argentina?
Sí, se juega mucho fútbol, se juega mucho básquetbol, hockey sobre césped,
Ujú.
polo.
Ok. Oye, ¿y qué recomiendas hacer antes de jugar fútbol?
Y recomiendo hacer ejercicio, estirar, correr un poco, creo que es
Ok.
lo mejor. Comer
Ujú.
bien también.
Hacer una dieta.
Hacer una dieta especial.
Sí. Oye, muéstranos qué puedes hacer con el balón.
A ver. Mira, la embarazada. Golazo.
Juan is practicing his skills at football or soccer. Juan explains that he's on an intramural team called La Garcha, and he's won several championships. He stresses the importance of taking care of the body before playing by warming up and also eating correctly. Juan puts his skills into practice at the end by kicking a big goal, or a golazo, into the net. Bravo! Felicitaciones! You have now finished this lesson. Estás haciendo mucho progreso. Now you can talk about sports with an emphasis on ongoing actions. You have practiced using hacer to express actions that have been going on for a while. And finally, you've added more expressions with hacer to your vocabulary and learned how to turn adjectives into adverbs. Now check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Bienvenidos a la lección 2. This lesson is about taking trips and then telling what happened, all in the past. You will practice the regular preterite tense along with the adverbs that are normally associated with past events. You will also use the verb hacer plus time expression plus que plus preterite to talk about an event that has happened some time ago. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this lesson, you'll learn the basic vocabulary to talk about taking trips. Strive to make new associations between sounds, images, written words, and the English translations. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate images and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word for it to stick in the memory. Afterwards, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Okay, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this lesson, you'll practice talking about past actions using the regular preterite tense, as well as study the adverbs that are normally associated with the past, like anoche, ayer, anteayer, la semana pasada, ese día, ya. You'll also use the expression hacer que plus time expression plus que plus preterite to talk about an event that happened some time ago. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. The preterite tense. Completely finished actions are expressed with the preterite tense, which is remarkably regular in Spanish for most AR, ER, and IR verbs, whether or not those verbs had irregularities in the present tense. Take notice of the accented final vowels for the first and third person singular forms. That's how Spanish speakers signal that the action has already taken place. Listen for these stressed final vowels. Occasionally, the first person needs to be written with minor spelling changes in order to maintain the original pronunciation of the verb. For instance, the verb organizar, which is written with a Z, Z-A-R, in the first person is organicé, written with a C. The verb recargar in the first person is recargué, written with a G-U-E. The verb identificar in the first person is identifiqué, but written with Q-U-E. This only affects the writing. Clearly, the pronunciation is totally regular. Now let's take a look at the first chart, which gives us the AR preterite verb endings with the verb hablar. First person, second person, third person, singular and plural. Hablé, hablaste, habló, hablamos, hablasteis, hablaron. Notice, first of all, that in the first and the third person, you have an accent mark put on that final vowel. So hablé, habló. And also notice that hablamos is exactly the same form as the present. How do you know the difference? Context. Now let's go and look at the ER and the IR verbs for the verb comer and the verb abrir. Comí, comiste, comió, comimos, comisteis, comieron. For abrir, abrí, abriste, abrió, abrimos, abristeis, abrieron. Again, notice with the nosotros form, for the IR verb, abrimos is exactly the same as the present tense. Context will tell you. Now let's look at some examples. Reservé una habitación en el hotel. I reserved a room in the hotel. Again, notice that the stress and a written accent mark is going on that last final vowel, E. Reservé. Recorrí las ciudades de Europa el verano pasado. I went all around the cities of Europe last summer. Nos emitieron los billetes por email. They sent us the tickets via email. ¿Manejaste un coche en Inglaterra? Did you drive a car in England? Visitamos los monumentos históricos. We visited all of the historical monuments. How do you know that visitamos is the preterite? The context. Hace plus the time expression plus the preterite. This is to signal the idea of a go. To show an action occurred some time ago, use the construction hace plus your time plus que, and then the preterite tense. Or its flip version, the preterite tense, hace plus time. So let's look at an example. Hace 2 años que viajé a Buenos Aires. I went to Buenos Aires 2 years ago. Or the flip version, viajé a Buenos Aires hace 2 años. Certain adverbs go hand in hand with past events. For instance, anoche, last night. Ayer, yesterday. Anteayer, the day before yesterday. La semana pasada, last week. El año pasado, last year. Or the expression hace plus time to express the idea of ago. Or the word ya, already. Ese día, that day. Let's look at some examples. Reservamos una habitación anoche. We reserved a room last night. Again, the context of anoche lets you know that reservamos is not the present, but the past. The form is the same. Volvió a su país la semana pasada. He returned to his country last week. Organizaron un viaje a Sudamérica hace 3 años. They organized a trip to South America 3 years ago. Welcome to the Perspectivas section. In this lesson, you will hear from Maria Fernanda, or Fer, who is from Mexico. And she'll be talking about her summer trip to Southeast Asia, Thailand and Vietnam. She'll tell us about her adventures, all in the past. Vamos a ello.
¡Ay, ya llegaste, María Fernanda!
Hola,
¿A dónde viajaste este verano?
fui a Tailandia, estuve en Vietnam y también visité Camboya.
¿Y qué hiciste en esos lugares?
Pues en Tailandia estuve casi todo el tiempo en la montaña, tomé un tren para llegar ahí, estuve visitando parques nacionales de elefantes. En Vietnam viajé a algunas islas en barco, visité algunas playas, conocí diferentes templos y un poco sobre la situación comunista del país. En Camboya también viajé a muchas zonas arqueológicas, estuve en varias ciudades en donde hay muchas iglesias, muchos templos, mucha estructura francesa y probé diferentes alimentos. La comida asiática es muy diferente a la comida norteamericana. Y frutas, muchas frutas diferentes y bebidas también muy diferentes.
¿En dónde te hospedaste?
Cuando viajo sola, me hospedo en hostales, que son pequeños hoteles que tienen cuartos para mujeres, cuartos para hombres y cuartos mixtos.
¿Y cómo llegaste hasta ahí?
Cuando viajé a Asia, volé por avión desde California y entre los países tomé el transporte público. En algunos momentos fui por tren, en algunos momentos por autobús, en otros momentos por taxi.
¿Y haces otro tipo de viajes?
Sí, estos son mis viajes de aventura que hago con mi mochila, pero también he tenido que viajar por cuestiones de trabajo o por cuestiones de la academia. Y entonces en estos viajes utilizo este tipo de equipaje, una maleta, en donde puedo llevar mi ropa formal con zapatos formales y algunas otras cosas para maquillaje y belleza.
Bueno, muchas gracias, María Fernanda.
De nada.
Hasta luego.
Adiós.
Last summer, Maria Fernanda went to Southeast Asia. In Thailand, she took a trip up to the mountains. She saw lots of wildlife, including elephants. In Vietnam, she went out to some islands in a boat and enjoyed the beach. She saw how the communist government works for the people. Cambodia is full of archaeological sites that she visited. She tried all kinds of food that are not known in the Americas. She stayed in hostels rather than hotels in order to keep the costs down. She travels with a backpack and a single suitcase. Very organized. Bravo, felicitaciones. You've now finished this lesson. Te va saliendo muy bien el curso. Now you can use the past tense to talk about trips you've taken along with the appropriate adverbs. You can now use also hace plus que plus the preterite to express an action that started and finished some time ago. Now check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Hola, bienvenidos a la lección 3. This lesson is about living arrangements and narrating stories in the past. You will practice the imperfect tense and then contrast it with the preterite. Both of these are tenses used to talk about the past. You'll also learn some irregular preterite verbs as well. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this lesson, you will learn the basic vocabulary to talk about living arrangements. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, the images, the written words, and the English translations. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate images, and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word to stick in the memory. Afterwards, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. So, let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this lesson, you will practice talking about past actions using both the imperfect tense for descriptions and the preterite tense for actions. You will study the contrast between these two past tenses, as well as practice some of the irregular verbs in the preterite. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. The imperfect tense. Past actions not viewed as completed are expressed with the imperfect tense. You can use the imperfect to refer to repeated, habitual, in progress, ongoing, or other past events without reference to when they began or when they ended, such as one's childhood, which doesn't have a beginning or really an end, but is really more important to think about the period in the middle. Descriptions in the past are usually expressed with the imperfect because starting and ending points are not the focus of what you're saying. Descriptions are about middles. You can use the imperfect to set the stage for other more dramatic actions that took place or were taking place. For instance, if I say, limpiaba mi casa mientras escuchaba música en la radio cuando alguien tocó la puerta. Translated, I was cleaning my house and listening to music on the radio when someone knocked at the door. In this case, the cleaning the house, the listening to the music, set the stage for the action of someone who came and knocked on the door. The imperfect tense endings are for AR verbs, aba, and for ERIR verbs, ia, respectively. Verbs that express states tend to be in the imperfect when talking in the past. For example, tenía un dolor de cabeza. I had a headache. The importance is the middle of having the headache. Me sentía mal. I was feeling bad. Again, the importance is the middle of the feeling bad. Estaba triste. I was sad. Sabía mucho. I knew a lot. You're not referring to the end or the beginning of knowing. It's the middle. Me hacía falta un café. I needed a coffee. So now let's look at the charts, first for the AR imperfect verb endings, the aba. So with the verb hablar, we have hablaba, hablabas, hablaba, hablábamos, hablabais, and hablaban. For the ERIR verbs, we have the endings which end in ia. So comía, comías, comía, comíamos, comíais, comían. Or with abrir, abría, abrías, abría, abríamos, abríais, abrían. Let's look at some examples. El dueño del apartamento me cobraba el alquiler siempre al final del mes. My landlord always collected the rent at the end of the month. Mis amigos me visitaban de vez en cuando en el hospital. My friends visited me, off and on, in the hospital. De joven, mi madre me escondía mis cómics. When I was a child, my mother used to hide my comics. Para ir al colegio, salíamos de casa muy temprano. To get to school, I used to leave the house very early. So all of the verbs and the actions referred to in the examples are focusing in on the middle, and that's what you signal with the imperfect tense. Now, there are only a few irregular verb forms in the imperfect for the verb ser, ir, and ver. So for ser, it's era, eras, era, éramos, erais, eran. For ir, it's iba, ibas, iba, íbamos, ibais, iban. And finally for ver, it's veía, veías, veía, veíamos, veíais, veían. There are some irregular verbs in the preterite. Let's take a look at them. There's a whole set of verbs in the preterite that have a different stem for the preterite forms. And let's go over them. For instance, the verb tener. For the preterite, the stem is tuv. For estar, estuv. Andar, anduv. Poder, pud. Venir, bin. Hacer, is. Poner, pus. Decir, dich. Querer, quis. Saber, sup. Traer, traj. Conducir, conduj. And caber, cup. Now, to these stems, you're going to add the following endings. Iste, o, imos, istais, hicieron. So let's look at the chart for these verbs. Let's take a verb like tener, which is tuv. So here are the endings that you add. Tuve, tuviste, tuvo, tuvimos, tuvisteis, tuvieron. Let's take a verb like hacer. Hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicisteis, hicieron. Now, note that the first and the third person endings are no longer stressed, as was the case with the irregular preterite endings. And there's no written accent. Also notice that with the verb hacer, the third person singular is hizo, and it has to be spelled with a Z, not a C. Otherwise, you would lose the sound of hizo, and it would be ico, which is not correct. Let's look at some examples. Me puse la chaqueta esta mañana porque hacía frío. I put on a jacket this morning because it was cold. Notice that puse is in the preterite, and notice that hacía frío is in the imperfect. Tuve un susto con el aumento del alquiler. I had a fright with the increase of the rent. Estuvimos muy cerca del cole. We were very close to my school. Vino tarde a la reunión. He came late to the meeting. ¿Hiciste la tarea para hoy? Have you done the homework for today? Now, there's a whole set of IR verbs that have stem changes in the present, but then they also have stem changes in the preterite. And where the O in the present tense goes to we, in the preterite it goes to u. And where the E in the present tense goes to ye, in the preterite it goes to e. So let's look at this group of verbs. Dormir, pedir, despedir, vestirse, preferir, sentir, reír. So let's take dormir, to sleep. Dormí, dormiste, durmió. There the O changes to U. Durmió. Dormimos, dormisteis, durmieron. So these changes are only affecting the third person singular and plural. Let's take another verb in this group. Pedir, to ask for. Pedí, pediste, pidió. Pedimos, pedisteis, pidieron. And another verb in this group, sentir, to feel. Sentí, sentiste, sintió. Sentimos, sentisteis, sintieron. Finally, there's a group of verbs that have completely irregular forms. That includes ser, ir, and dar. So for the preterite for ser, fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. And for ir, it's just the same. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. Context will tell you the difference. And for dar, di, diste, dio, dimos, disteis, dieron. Now, be advised, there are a few superficial spelling changes for the preterite forms that are just done to preserve the original sound of the verb. For instance, comenzar, which is spelled with a Z, in the first person has to be spelled with a C. Comencé. Llegar, which is spelled L-E-G-A-R, in the preterite first person has to be llegué, spelled with G-U. The verb hacer, we've already talked about, where the C has to switch to a Z for hizo. And buscar, in the first person it's busqué, spelled Q-U-E. And finally, tocar, to touch or to play an instrument. Toqué, spelled Q-U-E. The contrast between the imperfect and the preterite. Well, since Spanish has two past tenses, the preterite and the imperfect, with different functions respectively, this is going to be difficult. So let's take a look at it. The preterite emphasizes the punctual nature of a completed event and makes reference to either a starting point or an ending point. The imperfect, by contrast, refers to the middle of the event without any reference to the endpoints. So, use the preterite for actions and use the imperfect for descriptions or habitual past actions or repetitions or ongoing past events. Accordingly, the imperfect sets the stage by giving descriptions in the past, and the preterite provides the past actions that move the narration along. Let's look at some examples. Leía el periódico cuando me llamó mi madre. I was reading the paper when my mother called. So we have an ongoing action, reading the paper, interrupted by a more immediate action of the calling. Another example. De niño jugaba con los animales y les daba de comer. As a child, I played with the animals and I fed them. Here we have two uses of the imperfect. The first one is a habitual and then a repeated action. Here's another example. Julio César vino, vio y conquistó. Julius Caesar came, saw, and conquered. Here we have a series of actions, one after another, all in the preterite. Preterite, preterite, preterite. This moves the storyline along. Let's look at a final example. Yo leí un libro mientras se cocinaba la cena. I was reading while dinner was being cooked. Here we have two events referred to as not being finished, happening at the same time in the past, two uses of the imperfect tense. Study these examples and practice your forms. Welcome to the Perspectiva section. In this lesson, you will hear from Rebecca. She is from Soria in the northern part of Spain, and she's going to be telling us about 4 different living arrangements that she's experienced in her life. First, on a farm with lots of animals as a child. Then later, as a young girl, she moved to the city and lived in a flat with her family. And then as a university student, she lived in a small apartment. And finally, as a graduate student at the university, she moved into a house with a garden, a big patio, and a big garage. Pay close attention to how she uses the preterite or the imperfect while telling her story. Vamos a ello. Rebecca tells us about the different living arrangements she's experienced in her life. As a child, she lived on a farm with her grandmother and lots of animals. Then she moved with her entire family to a large city flat, and she was very close to her secondary school. At the university, Rebecca lived in a studio apartment with a kitchen, dining room, and living room all combined into one. As a graduate student, she lived in a big house with a garden, patio, and garage. Rebecca has enjoyed all of these dwellings, but she remembers with great fondness living with her grandmother and all of the animals she played with. There's nothing like our childhood memories. Bravo! Felicitaciones! You have now finished this lesson. Hiciste muy bien. Now you can talk about the past in both the imperfect and the preterite tenses. Check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Así me gusta! You have completed the 3rd course and expanded your Spanish vocabulary to include sports terms and expressions, with a little help from our friend Juan from Argentina. And by adding several new helping verbs to your vocabulary, you can also discuss your favorite pastimes and travel. You began to work in the past tense and in the progressive tenses, big steps in your journey towards becoming a Spanish speaker. There's only one more course to go before we apply what you've learned in the final project. I hope to see you there. Nos veremos. Hola y bienvenidos. In this 4th course of our specialization, you'll take your knowledge of Spanish to the next level, and we'll explore the world of food, restaurants, clothing, shopping for clothing, as well as careers and professions. You'll continue to add on new words to your vocabulary, and by the end of the course, you'll be very close to mastering the first 2,000 most frequent words of Spanish. In the last course, we practiced talking about things that had happened in the past, and you learned to use both the imperfect and preterite tenses to tell stories. Now it's time to take the leap into the future, and we'll learn about the subjunctive and the future and conditional tense so that you can express yourself about events that are not necessarily part of your experience. You'll also be assigned a project that will demonstrate how far you've come. As always, there's a lot to cover, so vamos al futuro. Hola y bienvenidos. This first module is about food, restaurants, and asking people to do things. You will practice the commands and the subjunctive mood in order to request, suggest, invite, or refuse an action. You'll also learn some irregular preterite verbs as well. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this lesson, you will learn the basic vocabulary to talk about food and restaurants. Strive to make new associations between sounds, images, written words, and the English translation. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate images and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word to stick in the memory. Afterwards, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, so pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this lesson, you'll practice talking about using commands and making requests, suggestions, invitations, and refusals. This is a complicated topic because it also involves choosing formal or informal address. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. In order to get people to do things, sometimes you need to use direct commands. As with all conversations in Spanish, you must also choose between the informal, singular tú, plural vosotros, or the formal, singular usted, plural ustedes, with age being the most consistent factor in favor of using the formal address. In other words, older people and strangers should be addressed formally in most circumstances. This complicates learning the command forms enormously and makes using the correct command form consistently a challenge that requires time to learn. So don't be discouraged by all of the forms, namely informal, formal, singular, plural, affirmative, negative. Formal commands are built off the present tense first-person singular stem, followed by the opposite theme vowel. Namely, if you have an AR verb, use an E, but if you have an ER or an IR verb, use an A. Remember that there are many verbs in the present tense that have irregular first-person singular stems. To form a negative command, just add no in front of the verb. So let's go through some examples. Let's take an AR verb like pasar. So the command form would be pase, and the plural pasen. A verb like comer, coma, coman. A verb like recibir, reciba, reciban. Then a stem-changing verb like contar, to count, cuente, cuenten, or devolver, to return, devuelva, devuelvan, or a verb like servir, sirva, sirvan, or a verb like pedir, pida, pidan. Now, some verbs in the present tense have completely irregular first-person stems. That would include a verb like tener, tenga, tengan, decir, Diga, digan. Salir, salga, salgan. Poner, ponga, pongan. Traer, traiga, traigan. Ofrecer, ofrezca, ofrezcan. Saber, sepa, sepan. Venir, venga, vengan. Hacer, haga, hagan. We just talked about the formal affirmative commands. Now let's look at the informal affirmative commands. They're just the same as the present tense third-person singular forms. But many verbs such as tener, decir, salir, venir, etc., they have irregular informal commands, as can be seen by the chart we're going to take a look at in a second. For the informal vosotros commands, simply add ad or ed or id to the verb, depending if it's an AR, ER, or IR verb, respectively. Latin Americans really don't use the vosotros form, and so they just double up using the ustedes command form for both the informal and the formal plural commands. Context will tell you whether or not it's informal or formal. Okay, so now let's look at some of the forms. Now let's take again our verb pasar, which is regular in the present tense, and the third person of the present tense is simply pasa. And then the vosotros form would be adding on the ad. So pasad. Let's take a verb like cobrar, which means to take money, to pay your bill, to take money. So you would say cobra and then cobrad. Let's take a verb like comer, come, comed. Let's take a verb like escribir, escribe, escribid. Now we move on to the stem-changing verbs. Contar would be cuenta, and the vosotros form would be contad, without any stem changing. Devolver, devuelve, devolved. Servir, sirve, servid. Pedir, pide, pedid. Now for the verbs that have completely irregular first-person forms in the present tense, we have a shortened form, basically, for the informal commands. For tener, we have ten. For poner, we have pon. For decir, we have di. For salir, we have sal. For venir, we have ven. For saber, we have se. And for hacer, we have haz. Of course, the vosotros forms are going to be more or less regular. Tened, poned, decid, salid, venid, sabed, haced. To form the negative informal commands, add an S to the formal affirmative command form. So here we go. We're making negative commands which are informal. For pasar, no pases. For comer, no comas. For recibir, no recibas. For contar, no cuentes. For devolver, no devuelvas. For servir, no sirvas. For pedir, no pidas. For tener, no tengas. For decir, no digas. For salir, no salgas. For poner, no pongas. For traer, no traigas. For ofrecer, no ofrezcas. For saber, no sepas. For venir, no vengas. For hacer, no hagas. Now it really gets complicated. Most verbs entail using reflexive, direct, or indirect object pronouns. You've seen these before: me, te, se, le, lo, etc. Attach these pronouns at the end of an affirmative command. but you'll need to add a written accent to preserve the original stress pattern of the verb. For negative commands, put the object pronouns in between the no and the verb. The order is always the same. You're only going to have one or two pronouns in combination. You'll never have three, but the order is going to be reflexive pronouns first, indirect object pronouns second, and direct object pronouns third. So let's look at some situations and what you might say. So to command buying or not buying an item, you'd say, cómpreselo. Or in the negative, no se lo compre. Informally, you'd say, cómpraselo. Or in the negative, no te lo compres. How about to command taking or not taking your pills? Those are pastillas. So formally, you'd say, tómaselas. And negatively, you'd say, no se las tome. Informally, you'd say, tómatelas. Or negatively, no te las tomes. To command eating or not eating, for instance, a piece of pizza, which would be la pizza, formally you'd say, cómasela. Or negatively, no se la coma. Informally, you'd say, cómatela. Or negatively, no te la comas. To command or not having a good time, which is the verb divertirse, you would say formally, diviértase mucho. Or if you want to discourage that, no se divierta tanto. Informally, you'd say, diviértete mucho. Or to discourage it, no te diviertas tanto. To command something to be brought to you or not brought to you, you would say formally, tráigamelo. Or to discourage that, no me lo traiga. Informally, you'd say, tráemelo. Or negatively, you'd say, no me lo traigas. To command that someone puts on their shoes or not puts on their shoes, formally you'd say, póngaselos. And negatively, no se los ponga. Informally, you'd say, póntelos. And negatively, no te los pongas. It's very complicated, and you'll only learn to use the informal and formal commands with lots of practice and through real exchanges with Spanish-speaking people in a real context. So be patient. We have already studied how to make polite requests and suggestions in Spanish by using the following construction. Me quieres traer, me quieres poner, me quieres hacer. Another way to do this is by using two clauses, which means two conjugated verbs, and with the second verb, the requested action, in the subjunctive mood. The subjunctive is used to talk about something not yet part of your personal experience. Every action requested, suggested, invited, or refused is by definition not part of your personal experience because it hasn't happened yet. So you'll use the subjunctive to talk about it. The subjunctive forms look very much like the formal command forms, but conjugated in all the persons, all the numbers, using the opposite theme vowel. Again, if you have an AR verb, you're going to use e. If you have an ER and IR verb, you're going to use a. So let's look at some verbs. Okay, comprar, to buy. So the subjunctive forms in all of the first, second, third, singular and plural endings would be compre, compres, compre, compremos, compréis, compren. And for a verb like comer, it would be coma, comas, coma, comamos, comáis, coman. And for a verb like recibir, it would be reciba, recibas, reciba, recibamos, recibáis, reciban. For your stem-changing verbs, like contar, devolver, servir, you're going to have almost the same irregularity that you see in the present tense, but using the opposite theme vowel. So for contar, you have cuente, cuentes, cuente, contemos, contéis, cuenten. And for devolver, you have devuelva, devuelvas, devuelva, devolvamos, devolváis, devuelvan. And for servir, you have sirva, sirvas, sirva. Servamos, serváis, sirvan. Now, you also have those verbs that in the first person of the present tense are completely irregular, and that then becomes not only the command form, but the basis for all of the subjunctive forms. So take a verb like tener, right? So then you have tenga, tengas, tenga, tengamos, tengáis, tengan. A verb like decir, you have diga, diga, digas, diga, digamos, digáis, digan. A verb like salir, salga, 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 salgamos, salgáis, salgan. A verb like poner, ponga, pongas, ponga, pongamos, pongáis, pongan. A verb like traer, traiga, traigas, traiga, traigamos, traigáis, traigan. A verb like venir, venga, vengas, venga, vengamos, vengáis, vengan. A verb like saber, sepa, 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 sepamos, sepáis, sepan. A verb like hacer, haga, hagas, haga, hagamos, hagáis, hagan. There are three completely irregular verbs in the subjunctive. They are ir, to go, ser, to be, and ver, to see. So for ir, you have vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, vayáis, vayan. For ser, you have sea, 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 seamos, seáis, sean. And for ver, you have vea, veas, vea, veamos, veáis, vean. Now here are some examples of requests, suggestions, invitations, or refusals using the subjunctive. Quiero que me traigas otro café. I want you to bring me another coffee. You see, this is a request and is a very polite way to do it. Another example. Mi profesor nos sugiere que hagamos la tarea a tiempo. My professor suggests that we do our homework on time. So it's like a command, but we'll call it a suggestion. Here's another one. Es necesario que veamos la carta primero. We have to see the menu first. This is clearly a request to have someone bring you the menu. Let's look at an invitation. Te invitamos a que comas en casa. We would like to invite you to eat at our house, to dine at our house. So that's an invitation. Te pido que no vayas a otro restaurante. I'm asking you, please, not to go to another restaurant. So that's a request. Another example. Mis padres prefieren que el cocinero no les ponga mucha sal en la comida. My parents prefer that the chef doesn't put a lot of salt on the food. That's obviously a request or a command, but again, it's a softened command. Another example. No permito que me lleves a ese restaurante. I won't allow that you take me to that restaurant. So that's clearly a refusal, but in a way, it's a negative command. One final example. Es preciso que salgamos de aquí inmediatamente. We have to leave this restaurant right now. So it's like a command or a suggestion. As you can see, in all of these cases, the subjunctive is being used in lieu of using direct commands. Why? Because it's slightly more polite. The following expressions are essential to talk about going out in public. Salir de fiesta, that's to go partying. Salir con, that's to date. Ir de compras, to go shopping. Ir de copas, to go drinking. Pasarlo bien, to have a good time. Pasarlo mal, to have a bad time. Remember, you can't use tiempo. You can't say tener un buen tiempo because that means to have good weather. Buen rollo, that means good vibes, good feelings. Buena onda means the same. Pasar de means to pay no attention to something. All right, let's look at some examples. Susana sale de fiesta todas las noches. Susana parties every night. Let's look at another example. A Susana y Ana les gusta ir de compras. So Susan and Ana like to go shopping. Let's look at another example. La fiesta estuvo muy bien, de buen rollo. The party was really good, good vibes. Susana sale con un agente de viajes. Susana is dating a travel agent. Yo paso de lo que dicen de mí. I don't pay any attention to what they're saying about me. Lo pasamos bien en la fiesta. We had a good time at the party. Welcome to the Perspectivas section. In this lesson, you'll hear from Tarcisio, who's from Mexico, and he'll tell us about his Mexican restaurant, Taqueria Davis. They specialize in burritos and typical dishes from the traditional Mexican cuisine.
Hola Tarcisio, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes,
¿Cómo
Fernanda.
estás?
Muy bien, ¿y tú?
También, gracias. Oye, ¿me puedes hablar un poco de Taqueria Davis?
Claro, Taqueria Davis es un restaurante mexicano familiar que empezamos a funcionar en el año 2000 hasta la fecha, y nos especializamos en burritos y platillos auténticos mexicanos.
Perfecto, muy bien. Oye, ¿y qué me recomiendas que pida para cenar?
Te recomiendo que compres, tenemos varias cosas, pero las enchiladas de mole son muy sabrosas.
Okay. ¿Y qué me recomiendas que beba con las enchiladas?
Te podemos preparar una michelada, que es una cerveza con un poco de sabores agridulces, o puedes ordenar una agua de horchata o un agua de Jamaica.
Okay. ¿Y qué me recomiendas que pruebe para el postre?
En el postre puedes ordenar un delicioso flan.
Un flan. Okay. ¿Tienen algunos especiales entre semana?
Sí, por lo regular cada día tenemos un especial diferente, aunque jueves, viernes y sábado son los días más populares, con el jueves enchiladas de mole, el viernes pozole de pollo y el sábado pastor en el trompo.
Okay. ¿Qué tipo de carne es pastor?
El pastor es carne de cerdo.
¿Y en las enchiladas qué carne hay?
En las enchiladas se hacen regularmente con pollo.
Okay, muchas gracias.
El pozole también es con pollo.
Bien. ¿En dónde está ubicado Taqueria Davis?
Taqueria Davis se encuentra en la esquina de la 5 y la L, aquí en Davis, California.
¿Y cuáles son sus horarios?
Trabajamos de 11 de la mañana a 9 de la noche, de lunes a sábado.
Muy bien. Los visitaré pronto. Gracias.
Gracias, aquí los esperamos.
Hola! In this lesson, you heard from Tarcisio from Mexico, who told us about his Mexican restaurant, Taqueria Davis. Tarcisio made a series of suggestions on what to order: enchiladas de mole, what to drink, una michelada, aguas frescas, agua de Jamaica, horchata, and of course what to have for dessert, flan de casa. He considers his enchiladas de mole to be his best traditional dish. Tarcisio ended by giving the listener his location and work schedule. Now that you have a better idea of what Tarcisio was talking about, go back and rewatch the video a few times and see if you can pick out more of what he was saying. When you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Felicitaciones! Enhorabuena! You've now finished the first module. Hiciste muy bien. Now you can use the commands and the subjunctive. Go and check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Hola, bienvenidos. This module is about using the subjunctive to talk about things or events expected but not yet part of the speaker's experience. You'll also learn vocabulary to talk about clothing and shopping for clothes. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this lesson, you'll learn the basic vocabulary to talk about clothes, shopping, and money. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, images, and written words and the English translations. In the exercises, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate images and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word so it will stick in the memory. Afterwards, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish that will help you increase your vocabulary, but pay particular attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. Let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this lesson, you'll practice talking about the subjunctive and use it to talk about things and events that are not yet part of the speaker's experience. This is a complicated topic because it also involves choosing formal or informal address. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Remember from Lesson 10 that Spanish uses the subjunctive to talk about something that's not yet part of your experience, such as a request or a suggestion. For instance, quiero que me traigas un café. In this case, you don't have the coffee as yet, and no one has brought you anything. So none of this is part of your experience, and it may never be. You can talk about these things that aren't part of your experience, but when you do this, you use the subjunctive. We can also do this when we're modifying something and trying to describe it. If it doesn't exist, we'll use the subjunctive in the adjective clause that describes or modifies the item in question. So let's study some adjective clauses in the following examples. The first one, quiero comer un plato que no tenga carne. I'd like to eat a dish that has no meat in it. You really don't know if that exists in this restaurant or where you are. Let's try another example. Busco un empleo que me deje estar de vacaciones por un mes. I'm looking for a job that allows me to be on vacation for a month. Again, that job may not exist. Let's look at another example. No hay nadie que sepa hacer este trabajo tan bien como yo. There's no one who can do the job as well as me. Obviously, you're talking about nobody, which is something that doesn't exist. You use the subjunctive. One more example. ¿Hay algo de este trabajo que te moleste mucho? Is there anything about this job that bothers you a lot? We don't know if there is, so we're talking about something at the moment that is not existent. So you use the subjunctive. Let's look at another example. No tenemos en este momento un puesto que sea lo que usted busca. We don't have a job right now that's what you're looking for. So again, we're talking about a job that doesn't exist. We'll use the subjunctive. In Spanish, events yet to happen, no matter how expected or wished for, are expressed in the subjunctive, again, because they're not part of your experience. Habitual events, on the other hand, are part of your experience and are signaled by the indicative tenses. Events that have already happened are, by definition, part of your experience, and they take the indicative. Events that are introduced by adverbial conjunctions such as cuando, hasta que, para que, tan pronto que, will take the subjunctive. Let's look at an example. Cuando consiga un buen empleo, voy a comprarme un coche. When I get a good job, I'm going to buy a car. That's in the subjunctive, cuando consiga un buen empleo, because that event hasn't happened yet. And let's look at another example. Cuando Jorge sale del trabajo, su mujer viene a recogerlo. Now we're dealing with something which is habitual. When George gets out of work, his wife comes and picks him up. That happens every day. So we use the indicative because it's a habitual event. Let's look at another example. No pienso comprar mucha ropa hasta que me den una promoción. I'm not going to buy a whole lot of clothing until they give me a promotion. Clearly, you haven't gotten your promotion yet. The event is not part of your experience, and so you use the subjunctive. Hasta que me den una promoción. Let's look at another example. Here's something that's already happened. No compré mi casa hasta que me dieron un aumento de sueldo. I didn't buy my house until they gave me a salary raise. Well, this has happened, so you use the indicative. Let's look at another example. Él va a comprarse un traje nuevo para que los directores se fijen en él. He's going to buy himself a new suit so that the directors will notice him. Well, the directors haven't noticed him yet. That's something that is desired. So, para que los directores se fijen en él, you use the subjunctive. And let's look at a final example. Tan pronto que me llamen, me voy a entrevistar. Well, as soon as they call me back, I'll do my interview. But they haven't called him as yet, so you have to use the subjunctive. Tan pronto que me llamen. The subjunctive is also used in Spanish when talking about hopes, fears, and things tinged with probability or doubt. Again, what's not part of your experience is signaled by the subjunctive mood. A particularly interesting case of this is the expression ojalá, which is derived from the Arabic phrase inshallah, may Allah will it, to express future wishes. Let me give you an example. Ojalá saquen una buena impresión de mí. I hope they come away with a good impression of me. You can also stick in a K if you want. You can say, ojalá que saquen una buena impresión de mí. The K is optional in this case. Another example. Tengo miedo de que no les guste mi ropa. I'm worrying they won't like my clothes, my wardrobe. Another example. Dudo que esta compañía encuentre a alguien mejor que yo. I don't think this company will find anyone better than me. Another example. Es muy probable que te digan los resultados en el acto. It's very likely they'll tell you the outcome right then and there. Another example. No puede ser que te rechacen. It's just not possible that they'll reject you. Another example. Espero que tengas éxito con tu búsqueda. I hope you'll be successful in your search. And a final example. No es posible que no te ofrezcan el trabajo. It's not possible that they won't offer you the job. The subjunctive is also used to express comments or opinions because they represent emotions and subjective evaluations and therefore are not considered part of experience. Let's see some examples. Me gusta que busques un empleo mejor. I'm glad you're looking for a better job. Es bueno que investigues todas las opciones. It's good for you to investigate all the options. Es natural que estés motivado para avanzar la carrera. It's natural that you're motivated to get ahead in your career. Es raro que vayas de compras para ropa. It's kind of strange that you're going shopping for clothes. Me alegro de que tengas una entrevista. I'm so glad that you're going to get an interview. Welcome to the Perspectiva section. In this lesson, you'll hear from Melissa, a young Chicana professional from California. She needs to buy clothing for a job interview that she has tomorrow. Hola! In this lesson, you heard from Melissa, a Chicana from California who's buying clothing for a job interview that she has tomorrow. Her clothes need to be formal but practical. Melissa shows us a variety of possible options for an interview outfit together with shoes. But she has a tight budget, only $100. She makes her choices and hopes for the best outcome for tomorrow's interview. Now that you have a better idea of what Melissa is talking about, go back, rewatch the video a few times, and see if you can pick out more about what she's saying. When you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Bravo! Felicitaciones! You've now finished this module. Hiciste muy bien. Now you can use the subjunctive to talk about things that are not yet part of your experience. You can talk about clothes, go shopping, and also handle money transactions. So now check your progress by doing the review quiz and the peer review activities. Hola, bienvenidos. This module is about using the future and the conditional tense to talk about probable and hypothetical events. You'll also learn vocabulary to talk about careers, jobs, and employment. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the vocabulary section. In this lesson, you will learn the basic vocabulary to talk about careers, jobs, and employment. Strive to make new associations between the sounds, images, written words, and the English translations. In the exercise, drag and drop the correct Spanish word onto the appropriate image and then listen to the Spanish pronunciation. Research tells us that you need to repeat this associative process about 10 times for each word so that it will stick in the memory. Afterwards, do the comprehension checks. There are many cognates between English and Spanish, and they'll help you increase your Spanish vocabulary, but pay attention to the small changes in spelling and pronunciation. So let's get to it. Vamos a ello. Welcome to the grammar section. In this lesson, you'll practice using the future and the conditional tenses to talk about probable and hypothetical events. Vamos a ello. In Spanish, we can express future events by using the lexical phrase ir a with an infinitive. For example, voy a cenar con unos amigos mañana. I'm going to eat with some friends tomorrow. ¿Vas a llamarme esta noche? Are you going to call me tonight? But Spanish also has a future tense with a full complement of endings, all the person and number endings, and those are added directly onto the infinitive form. The endings are he, has, ha, hemos, eis, han. Let's look at a typical AR, ER, and IR verb with the future endings added on to the end. For instance, llenar, to fill out, as in fill out a form or an application. Conocer, to know or to meet someone. Exigir, to demand. All right, so let's start with llenar, to fill out. Llenaré, llenarás, llenará, llenaremos, llenaréis, llenarán. Conocer, conoceré, conocerás, conocerá. Conoceremos, conoceréis, conocerán. Exigir, exigiré, exigirás, exigirá, exigiremos, exigiréis, exigirán. Now, some infinitive stems for the future are irregular, as you might expect. And it's the same culprits, verbs like tener, poder, salir, venir. Let's look at how you'd form the future with those kind of verbs. For tener, it's tendré, tendrás, tendrá. For poder, it's podré, podrás, podrá. For salir, it's saldré, saldrás, saldrá. For venir, it's vendré, vendrás, vendrá. For saber, it's sabré, sabrás, sabrá. For decir, it's diré, dirás, dirá. For hacer, it's haré, harás, hará. For querer, it's querré, querrás, querrá, with a double R. For haber, which ends up being the helping verb, it'll be habré, habrás, habrá, habremos, habréis, habrán. So with two ways of expressing the future, with the lexical phrase ir a with the infinitive or the future endings, you would wonder, well, which one do you use to express the future? Well, in Spanish, people use the lexical phrase to express the future. The voy a, vas a, vamos a. So then the question is, what are you going to use the future endings for? Well, Spanish uses the future endings to talk about events that are probable, actions still not part of your experience, but in all probability are true. If the event were clearly not part of your experience, then you'd use two clauses and the subjunctive, as we saw in the previous module. For example, no puede ser que Cindy esté en casa. It just can't be that Cindy is at home. It's just not true. So that's definitely not part of your experience. But let's look at some of these other examples where you use the future to express a probable event where you don't know it's sure for sure, but it's very, very likely to be true. So you might ask the question, ¿Dónde está Cindy? And the answer would be, estará en casa. Where's Cindy? She's probably at home. You're using the future endings there, but to indicate probability. Another example, será muy buena trabajadora. Cindy, she's probably a very good worker, but you don't have any direct experience, so you use the future to indicate probability. Los directores sabrán lo que hacen. The directors probably know what they're doing. They must know what they're doing. And you use the future to indicate probability. Cindy tendrá un teléfono móvil. Cindy probably has a cell phone. Llevará su móvil en la bolsa. She's probably carrying her cell phone in her purse. Cindy conocerá al nuevo jefe. Cindy probably knows the new boss. Serán las 2 de la tarde. It's probably 2 o'clock, but you don't have a watch, you don't really know. The conditional tense is used to refer to hypothetical events, actions that could be possible but didn't happen or are not likely to happen. Add the following endings directly to the regular or the irregular infinitive stem. Ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, ian. So let's take a regular verb like llenar to fill out. Llenaría, llenarías, llenaría, llenaríamos, llenaríais, llenarían. Or conocer, conocería, conocerías, conocería, conoceríamos, conoceríais, conocerían. Or exigir, exigiría, exigirías, exigiría, exigiríamos, exigiríais, exigirían. Or an irregular verb like tener, which would be tendría, tendrías, tendría, tendríamos, tendríais, tendrían. Here are some examples. ¿Te interesaría un puesto con muchas horas en la oficina? Would you be interested in a job with lots of hours at the office? Again, this is a hypothetical, so we use the conditional. Con mucho dinero me jubilaría ahora mismo. With lots of money, I'd retire right now. Another example. ¿Qué diría tu padre? What would your father say? Another example. ¿Aceptarías un puesto con un director mandón? Would you accept a job with a bossy boss? Another example. Con una credencial, Cindy solicitaría un puesto permanente. With a credential, Cindy would apply for a full-time teaching position. Again, it's hypothetical. She doesn't have a credential yet. And another example. Tendría un puesto mejor con un certificado más avanzado. She would have a better job if she had a more advanced degree. You assert as true what is part of your experience, and conversely, you don't assert as true what is not part of your experience. For the former, you use the indicative. For the latter, the subjunctive. And what's in between? Highly probable but not experienced as yet, you use the future tense. It's 3 ways to talk about the world, and the speaker can choose how to frame all the things that are said. Let's look at some examples of events presented as assertions, the indicative, non-assertions, the subjunctive, and then highly probable happenings when you use the future tense for that. Okay, so the first one is an assertion. We're going to use the indicative. Es obvio que esta compañía ofrece un sueldo muy bueno. It's obvious that that company offers a good salary. This is an assertion. It's true. It's part of your experience. Now let's look at another assertion. Again, we're going to use the indicative to show that it's part of our experience. Observo que los empleados están contentos. I can see that the employees are happy. Again, it's part of our experience. It's true. We use the indicative. Now let's look at something that's not asserted. So we're going to use the subjunctive. No es verdad que paguen bien. It's not true that they pay well. That's not part of our experience. Another example that's not part of our experience, not asserted, we use the subjunctive. Dudo que traten bien a sus empleados. I doubt they treat their employees well. That's not part of our experience. Now let's talk about something that's highly probable, but still not part of our experience, but highly probable. Most probably it's true. Now we're going to use the future. Pagarán buenos sueldos porque todo el mundo quiere trabajar aquí. Well, I think they probably pay good wages because everybody wants to work here. Now, I don't know it for sure, but it's pretty sure. And another example where it's highly probable, I'm going to use the future. Estarán contentos los empleados aquí. The employees are probably really happy here. But I don't know for sure, but it's very, very likely. The conditional tense is used to express very polite requests and soften commands. Let's look at some examples. ¿Tendrías un momento para leer mi solicitud? Would you please have a moment to read my application? Another polite example. ¿Podrías considerar mi solicitud para el puesto anunciado? Would you please consider my application for your announced position? Another example. ¿Me darías un consejo acerca de las ofertas? Would you give me some advice about the offers? And finally, te lo agradecería mucho. I would really appreciate it if you'd do that. Welcome to the Perspectivas section. In this lesson, you'll hear from Cindy, a young Mexican-American from California. She reflects on how she got her job as an elementary educational assistant.
Hola Cindy, ¿cómo estás?
Hola Fernanda, ¿bien y tú?
Bien, gracias. Oye, cuéntame un poco sobre tu profesión. ¿A qué te dedicas?
Actualmente soy asistente de educadora en una escuela primaria de Dixon.
Ok. ¿Y cómo obtuviste este trabajo? ¿Cuáles eran los requisitos?
Los requisitos para este trabajo eran bastantes. Tuve que llenar una solicitud en línea, tuve que escribir una carta de presentación, entregar cartas de recomendación y creo que fue todo. Tuve una entrevista y después pues me ofrecieron el trabajo y más que nada querían que fuera una persona responsable, puntual y honesta, ¿no? Para poder trabajar con los niños.
Muy bien. Oye, ¿y cuál es tu profesión? ¿Qué estudiaste?
Estudié la licenciatura en la Universidad de Davis en español y en inglés y después continué la maestría también en la Universidad de Davis en literatura latinoamericana.
Muy bien. Y como asistente educadora, ¿cuáles son tus funciones?
Mis funciones son más que nada trabajar con el grupo de estudiantes de kinder, porque en esta escuela las clases son mixtas. Hay estudiantes de kinder y hay estudiantes de primer grado juntos. Entonces yo me encargo de los de kinder, les doy lecciones de fonética, las letras, cómo pronunciar. Sí, más que nada eso.
Ok. ¿Y te gustaría tener este empleo por más años?
No, me gustaría regresar a la escuela y hacer una credencial en educación y para poder yo tener mis propias clases en el futuro.
¿Y cuánto tiempo estudiarías para esta credencial?
Estudiaría 1 o 2 años más.
Ok. ¿Y te quedarías aquí en California?
Creo que sí, pero puede cambiar. Sí, me gustaría quedarme en California porque el clima es lindo, la gente es amigable, pero si hay una oportunidad fuera de California o fuera de Estados Unidos, sí me gustaría vivir en otro lugar.
Ok. Oye, Cindy, ¿y qué recomiendas a los jóvenes para pedir trabajo en algún lugar?
Recomiendo que sean muy organizados, que sean honestos en sus solicitudes, que se tomen el tiempo de escribir buenas cartas, porque creo que las cartas de presentación son las más importantes en el proceso de solicitar trabajos.
Ok. Muchas gracias, Cindy.
De nada.
Bye.
In this lesson, you heard from Cindy, a young educational assistant at the elementary level. She reflected on how she got her job in the schools, and she described her day-to-day activities and how she works with children. Finally, she discusses her future plans to get a credential and become a full-time teacher in California or some other state. She gives a series of recommendations on how to get a job. Now that you have a better idea of what Cindy was talking about, go back, rewatch the video a few times to see if you can pick out more of what she was saying. And when you're ready, move on to the comprehension check. Bravo! Felicitaciones en grande! You've now finished this module, and you can talk about the future in conditional tenses to refer to probable and hypothetical events not yet part of your experience. You've also learned vocabulary for dealing with getting jobs, planning your careers. Now check your progress by going to the review quiz and by doing the peer review activities. Felicitaciones! You've completed the 4th course in our specialization, and you've reached a basic level of speaking Spanish. You've practiced working with the subjunctive, the future, and the conditional tenses. You can now talk about things that are part of your experience, things that are not part of your experience, and things that may be part of your experience. We also explored other cultural aspects of the Spanish-speaking world, including food, ordering in a restaurant, fashion, shopping, money, professions, and careers. By completing this course, you are now just one capstone course away from completing the specialization. Muy bien hecho!